Madam Clerk.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've received one other business item in advance of the meeting. It pertains to density bonus and development cost charges for 509 Clarke Road and was raised by yourself, Councillor Mail.
Thank you very much. Are there any other businesses for the Council and Committee? There is not.
The first item on the agenda is the minutes of the Council and Committee meeting held on Monday, October 24th. The recommendation to approve.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, seconded by Councillor Towner. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is our first delegation. I would like to invite Mr. Jeremy Trigg and Mr. Andy Broderick to please come forward. They will be providing an update on the Vancity Maillardville branch.
Thank you. Welcome to Council and Committee. I'm Councillor O'Neill, chairing the meeting. Mayor Stewart is out of the country.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. I just wanted to, the mayor had sent a letter to Vancity back on the 13th of October, and it outlined some concerns with process. And I think that letter drew to our attention that in terms of communication, while Vancity had been in touch with the planning department and so on, we'd not come back to council and advised of our change of direction and rationale. We caused unnecessary disruption, and that was certainly never our intent. We're committed to Maillardville. I think we're going to be the only financial, or are the only financial institution in Maillardville, and we fully intend to stay. The history of this, we merged with Village Credit Union, which was the old Caisse Populaire Maillardville, back in 2007. One of the processes we went through for due diligence was finding out what condition the buildings were in. And I'm a geologist by background, and after I had a quick chat with the structural engineer and he advised me of the seismic condition of that building, we immediately took steps to demolish that building. And to do that meant we had to move out and move back, and thus we applied for a temporary use permit, with that fully being our intention. We carried forward, spent a considerable amount of time and effort and money on a design, went through quantity surveyors, took it out to tender, and it came back about 35 to 40% over budget, which was well in excess what we could afford to pay. The building already was as small as planning would allow it to be. They had a particular vision for Brunette Avenue. So we stepped back and took a look and made a decision that we would move down to the Le Bleu location. We have acquired that site. We have permits to build on that site. We have it under construction. And I guess our view there is that this way we'll be there. And then Mr. Broderick, who's to my left here, will talk to you about what our plans are for the existing properties. I also just want council to be aware that Vancity is, and this was a discussion that we had with the mayor and Councillor Wilson back in May, with respect to the temporary building that's on the site. We're more than happy, if it works for the city of Coquitlam, to leave it there, lease it to you for $1 a year or whatever the statutory amount is. I'm sure our lawyers will tell us. I think it's $10 these days. And have it there until such time as the redevelopment occurs. There was discussion at that meeting about potentially other buildings you may have needed to rebuild, and we're very familiar with this whole move out, move back thing. So it's just an option for the city, and we stand by that option being offered. But
thank you.
Mr. Broderick will let you know what the plans are on a go-forward basis.
Yeah, no, I'm very, very happy to be here, and thanks for having us. I have served for 5 years as VP of Community Investment at Vancity, and I'm now the Vice President of Community sort of Business Impact Development. What's my title? In working as VP of Community Investment, we had developed a lot of strong relationships with community partners who are interested in developing affordable housing. The Co-op Federation of BC and a number of local groups here in Coquitlam and in Maillardville. And we had always viewed that site, the community investment side of Vancity, as a site for great potential for a mixed use, mixed income development that would sort of fully utilize the footprint. and try and actually really get a certain amount of density onto the site. So with the developments that occurred last spring around the pricing and the initial design, I've got to say that there was a fair amount of interest and even excitement on the part of the team I work with at Vancity, and we're quite just really beginning to sort of put our ducks in a row in terms of how to identify the partners we want to work with locally here. And I've reached out actually to your Bruce Irving at your housing policy, your planning policy, and I've also met with someone from the housing policy office and someone from planning about 2 weeks ago. We helped sort of identify what we thought was the sort of the policy vision for that area and around affordable housing development, affordable rental housing development in Coquitlam, and who would be the right partners to sort of reach out to and sort of understand what the local need might be and who might be a good operator. So we're early in that process, but I expect actually by the end of the year to sort of have identified some people that people will be trying to work with to build the program. In other words, what the uses will be. Again, we see it as rental housing, workforce really rental housing, but with a mixture of incomes. And really we'll wait to sort of fully define that until we work with partners locally to sort of figure that out.
Thank you very much. We have a couple of my colleagues on council who would like to ask questions and make comments. Councillor Zerillo and then Councillor Reid.
Thank you so much for coming in, giving us an opportunity to talk directly. We're talking about two different parcels of land right now. We're talking about the empty site and also the site that has the temporary building on it, right?
We are.
So
the proposal, and Jeremy can correct me if I'm wrong, but the proposal I'm putting forward would have to do with both sites.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We would look to join the two sites and come up with a single unified development plan in relation to that.
Okay, so I guess my question is actually for staff at this point. What is the current zoning on those two different sites?
It's communities.
Yeah. Mr. McIntyre.
Through the chair, I'd be going from distant memory, but I believe the one site is it's a commercial zone for the former Vancity Credit Union site and what was proposed. The others are, I believe, they might be residential because there are lots that were to the east of Nelson Creek and enabled that temporary use through a temporary use permit. I believe that's the zoning on the properties now.
I wonder if the gentleman from Vancity know exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's definitely residential where the temporary building is now. Actually, I thought it was mixed use, or maybe we were told it could easily become mixed use.
The planning overlay is neighborhood community?
Yeah.
So
I think the intent was mixed use with a particular, exactly. Commercial on the bottom and 3 or 4 stories of residential above, facing Brunette.
Yeah.
So I guess my comments would just be, it's wonderful that you came in because it's, I think it's, as you stated at the beginning, it's a communication exercise. And as you spoke today, Mr. Broderick, we want to make sure that we keep the community also into this conversation before you go too far down the road on what wants to be done there, because we are going to have to probably go through a rezoning process and it's going to involve a public hearing. So if I can say anything, it's just to keep the communication open to the community as well, and thank you for coming in.
You can be assured of that once burnt.
No, and I'll try and make sure it happens at all levels too. In other words, sometimes you can be talking at some levels and you're just not realizing that
Thank you.
it's complicated.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I'm delighted to hear that you're staying with us. That's really good. I know Councillor Marsden and I both have credit union backgrounds, and I was on BC Central many years ago. So I'm excited about this, but what I'm really excited about is some of the programs that Vancity has offered in the forms of affordable housing, in that, and I'll say fractional, that's not the correct word, but where we give a bit, you give a bit, and a lender would give a bit, and someone else would manage it. And I know they do it in Britain and other places, Ontario. And Vancity, I actually brought, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, Paris seems to be.
Dan Paris.
It was Dan, yeah. I brought him in here a few years ago and called all our planning staff. We really haven't gone much further than that. But I'm really interested in those parts for that proposal, and one of the reasons I am is that we have a lot of folks right now in subsidized housing that probably would be good candidates to move up to home ownership in housing assisted programs like this. And that would do two things. It would get them a chance to get home ownership, and it would give other folks a chance to move in at the level that they need in the subsidized housing. So I'm really interested to see what you have to offer in that way, but any rental housing is welcome, and especially family rental housing. We don't need a lot more one bedrooms. We need babies. And,
So family housing, no, and I think it's a good location. Yeah, the tenure of occupancy is an important principle, and
Yes.
sort of understanding that if you're constrained in one area of workforce rental or
Yeah.
entry level ownership, that it's sort of backing things up.
well, there's so many studies to prove that the program that you were backing, and I don't know, have you done any in Vancouver that would be good for this council who are not familiar with it to look at?
We've looked at a number of sort of shared equity models,
Yeah, that's
and,
what I
and
want.
some equity co-op models.
Yeah.
You know.
If you have any information on that, I would sure love just thumbnail sketches so
Yep.
that we can all get a better, I sort of get it, but it's difficult to explain.
No, I'd be happy to do that,
Yeah.
and that's my background. But prior to coming here, I spent 20 years working in Vermont around shared equity and
Good.
different home
Okay.
ownership models. Yeah.
Well, you're a guy we want to know. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Asmussen, then Councillor Wilson.
Well, thank you for coming out, and thank you for the improved communication going forward. I mean, I think some of us drove by, saw the signs in the windows, and went, what? Right? And there's a little bit of a loop that was missed here then caused some issues with council. And so going forward, as you mentioned to Councillor Zerrill, that you'll be making sure that communication is there. The look forward, more rental, different types of affordable housing is a good thing in the area, and that's something we want to see from you in the future. One of the disappointments for the community was the work the community did in with the heritage and the building and losing that feel from the building, because there was a lot of, and you look at the design, there was a lot of input from the community trying to tie in the history in the branch from the French Bank to Vancity when you took it over and bringing that history back in. So I would hope that within your branch that you're building in there, that'll be incorporated. But I also look forward that when you're reaching out, that you'll have some of that history within your rental proposal that's going in there. Because I think what I've heard from the community members was quite a disappointment in the building not going forward. And because there's a lot of community engagement on the design, a lot of community hope for that plan. And so I think that's one area that you're going to have to reach out and work on.
So, may I respond? We certainly realized that. In fact, when we met with Councillor Wilson and the Mayor, we were speaking to that and talking about what can we do within the space, and then, in fact, what can we do, if anything at all, in front of the existing branch, because it's got a fairly wide sidewalk there. There's a bus stop. There's a few other things. And we were certainly led to believe there may be we can go down that road. So we're going to be talking to West Group about that. As far as the branch is concerned, we are going to have display inside the branch for items coming out of the Heritage Museum. That is the plan. There also, the interior will very much reflect the history of Maillardville. I'd love to break into French, but my French is so bad. My wife would kill me, so I'm not going to do that. But we fully understand the community and the background of the community, and we intend to reflect that. And I think that can be done with respect without mansard roofs. I think there's other ways and I think that what we picked up on the community was that there's a long history here from the log mill that was here in the first place to the French community that's here. And I think you're going to see a lot of that. Our branches are not cookie cutter. We like to reflect the community in our individual branches.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you understand that. And once again, mansard roofs actually weren't really.
No. I was tongue in cheek.
But even in Maillardville, the history of it is not. There's some, but not a lot.
Yes.
And the design feel of Maillardville is a little different than some other areas.
Yeah.
But as long as you got that in context, when you look at that, and even the new rental building within that would be appreciated.
Yeah.
No, and I
very much
definitely
so.
just my view of rental housing too is really taking advantage of some of those historical connections if you can.
Yeah.
And sort of build a sense of place, because that's the kind of people you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
And things like the fretwork and things like that, we can pick up those elements that were discussed and some of the outcome of the discussion, and I think apply it as well.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. I was going to ask about what Brandon may ask about, so I'll just say thank you very much for coming in. And sorry about the miscommunication, and we're really looking forward to moving ahead on the project.
Oh, Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. Appreciate the update. Question for staff with regards to the neighborhood center that the OCP calls for here. Is the intent that it would be retail, commercial on the ground, and then residential above? Is there any flexibility with regards to some of the stuff we've seen in recent tours where it's the townhouse bottom and perhaps rental above it? So all rental, but townhouse, more family oriented, and then above it as opposed to the commercial component? Has there been any flexibility or possibility there?
Mr. McIntyre.
Fair question. I'd have to check the exact policy in the Maillardville neighborhood plan, because in the plan it does identify frontages that are supposed to have commercial at least at grade, but it does provide the option, the flexibility to have residential above. And so it might end at Nelson Creek as the eastern extent of the commercial, but I'd have to check on that, and I can, and I'll get back to council on that.
No, I appreciate that, because it just seems to me interesting that perhaps it might give that added flexibility in terms of design elements to keep with the historical nature of Maillardville, as opposed to that cookie cutter retail box on the bottom. So just if there's any possibility in there where it works to give a scope of possibilities from a design to help with the affordability component and get some people housed in there, that'd be great. Thanks for your update, gentlemen.
Thank you, gentlemen. On behalf of a young couple who in 1980 went to a community-based Caisse Populaire to get their first mortgage after the big bank turned them down, I thank you personally. And my wife thanks you as well for keeping a community-based institution in our community like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Caisse Populaire. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 3 is the proposed early release framework draft policy for Northwest Burke Vision area. We have introductory comments by the General Manager Planning and Development and a presentation by the Manager Community Planning and Senior Planner. Recommendation is to receive the report.
Yes, thank you. And I also note that the purpose of the report is to present the framework, but staff, of course, will be open to council's words of encouragement or words of opposition or suggestions if they would like to make them as well. Check this morning. So here you are. You get to sit at the big table now, Mr. McIntyre.
And it's truly an honor, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Good afternoon, Acting Mayor and Council. Just a few brief opening remarks and before I hand off to Carl and Steve, who have a presentation for you. You may recall the recent report on the Phase 2 of the Northwest Burke Vision area. We talked about coming forward very shortly with proposed approach for dealing with what we're calling early release lands. And so we're here today with that work. We will be following this up with the full Phase 3 analysis, which is well underway, and get that to you as soon as we can. Early release, the whole concept, I'm not take responsibility for this one or blame for it, was something the concept had come up early in the Northwest Burke process. There was
another option, of course, responsibility, blame, or credit, if you'd like to give yourself some of that, but
I'll let you have
perhaps
the
not.
conclusion, Mr. Chair. There was a lot of intense interest in the area, particularly in the Hazel area, about moving ahead with their first community plan amendments and rezoning and the like. So we did agree to look at that, what may be able to, as I said, early release. But I think the staff come up with is probably a more appropriate term, OCP amendment ready lands. And so that's what we have today for committee. It's here for your information. I have some questions for us. We welcome those. Looking for your feedback. So what we'd like to do is hope we're on the right track. We can refine that, then bring that back to council for council's formal consideration and endorsement as a way going forward. So, as I said, that's what we want to do. We'll be reporting back maybe before the end of the year on the Phase 3 work as well, leading into public consultation early in 2017. So, On that, I'll turn it over to Carl and Steve.
Great.
After the presentation.
Yes, Mr. Johansson.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Good afternoon, Acting Mayor and Council. Thanks for the opportunity to provide an update on Northwest Burke Vision, otherwise known as the NBV, namely the set of proposed early release criteria that we're presenting for Council's review and feedback, which we hope to utilize to guide the potential development of specific, as Jim said, OCP amendment-ready sites that are within the NBV area, but are also right adjacent to existing Burke Mountain neighborhood plan areas. So before we get into the criteria, just a bit of context. So we know that the NBV involves 400 hectares of land, some of the last greenfield development area on Burke Mountain. And once complete, the NBV will serve as a long-term game plan. And we're talking over the stretch of 30-plus years that will guide further stormwater, land use, and infrastructure planning, and ultimately urban development through phased neighborhood planning exercises. So getting back to the early release concept, this really applies to the properties that essentially sit on the boundary between the existing neighborhood plans like Smiling Creek and the NBV area, and they don't require significant new pieces of infrastructure or neighborhood planning. So before I hand things off to Steve to walk us through the criteria, I'd like to highlight the key differences between early release and the forthcoming phasing plan, which will be brought forward, as Jim said, as part of the draft vision in the near future. Now, as I've noted, the early release is about those immediate opportunities adjacent to the existing neighborhood plans. In comparison, the phasing plan will identify key sub-areas in the remaining NBV area, which is the vast majority of lands being looked at, that will require further planning. And very importantly, the phasing plan will also identify key pieces of road and servicing infrastructure that will need to be planned, funded, and constructed in order for these NBV sub-areas to become connected to the existing urban area and be able to develop. Draft NBV will also include land use overlays for these phases to provide initial land use direction and identify key features that are going to be included in these neighborhood plans. So with that, I'll hand things over to Steve, who's going to walk us through the criteria.
So the early release framework proposes 4 criteria that must be met for a site to be considered OCP amendment ready. To be eligible, a site must meet all of the 4 criteria. To fully understand the rationale for the proposed sites, I'll provide Council and Committee with an overview of the application of the criteria. First, to be considered OCP amendment ready, a site must be within the urban containment boundary. Otherwise, an amendment would be required to the RGS. The urban containment boundary is shown as a thick black line on the slide. Sub-area A, or the quarry lands, are currently outside of the urban containment boundary. So criteria number 2, to qualify as an OCP amendment ready site, a site must be adjacent to an approved neighborhood plan. The logic being that the neighborhood plan boundary could be extended to include the site in order to provide associated land use policies to guide future development. The sites in blue are adjacent to the approved neighborhood plans of Upper Hyde Creek, Smiling Creek, and Partington Creek. Third, it's proposed that sites must have cross-street access to utility servicing. The blue line on the slide shows the existing servicing boundary for immediate access to water, sewer, and drainage connections. In other words, proposed sites would not require upgrades to services that would be funded through capital expenditures or development cost charges. Final criterion, it is proposed that sites must not be separated from approved neighborhood plans by geographical barriers such as steep slopes, ravines, or extensive earthworks, as these boundaries represent a clearly defined neighborhood edge, and developing beyond them could be considered leapfrog development. Geographical barriers adjacent to approved neighborhood plans include the Hyde Creek Ravine, the Phil site, and Harper Road. These are the sites unconstrained by geographical barriers. So based on the application of the 4 criteria, 7 properties have been identified as OCP amendment ready. All of these sites are within the urban containment boundary, adjacent to approved neighborhood plans, and are not constrained by geographical barriers, and have across-the-street access to utility servicing. The proposed OCP amendment-ready lands account for about 12 hectares of the 165 hectares or so of the Vision's developable land area. This slide shows an example of sites that have across-the-street access to servicing and are abutting approved neighborhood plans. So for the proposed early release sites, the standard development application process would be followed. This would include an official community plan amendment through the application of the Northeast Coquitlam OCP amendment criteria approved by Council in 2010. Applicants would also have to ensure that they have access to lands beyond. The remainder of the lands in the Vision area require neighborhood level planning for a variety of reasons. For instance, subareas A and B would each require a neighborhood plan. For subarea A, land reclamation would need to occur following the closing of the quarry. And for subarea B, the existing development agreement for the Riverwalk lands will need to be implemented. In addition, sewer capacity upgrades are required to service both subareas. For subareas C, C1, and D, there are a number of neighborhood planning issues that will need to be addressed, from access off of Oxford and Coast Meridian to the extension of utility services across Hyde Creek. Also, similar to Baycrest and Partington, there are a number of property owners, in this case about 20, with differing aspirations regarding future development. A neighborhood planning process will provide a forum for these property owners to work with each other and city staff on local road network and site-specific land use issues. For subareas E, F, and G, they cover a large land area that contains a number of water courses which will require specific attention to detail in the planning of future neighborhoods. In addition, a new water reservoir will be required to serve the area. So following discussion today, staff will refine the proposed early release framework and then bring it forward to Council for consideration of endorsement. I'll conclude by saying that the Northwest Burke Vision is entering its final phase, and staff are currently pulling together a draft vision document, which will be brought forward to Council and Committee in the near future, with the next round of public consultation scheduled for early in 2017. So that's our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. We have several councillors who would like to give comments on how you might refine it, or perhaps just simple declarations. Councillor Reid, then Asmussen, then Marston.
We've had a lot of calls with respect to the, I guess you call it, Area A. And I think, along with Mr. McIntyre, that was something when we were working on the regional growth strategy, it just seemed to be a really prudent move on behalf of this council. And I think it is. It won't come to fruition for 10 years, maybe more, but at least it's done. And it was such an onerous procedure to go through that. I think you did a really good job, your department, on that. The only thing I'm asking, and you're going to hear me say this over and over today because there's so many applications, please, I don't want to get all the neighborhood plans and hopes and aspirations of developers coming in that we want the same old up there. I want some innovation. There are 1,000 different housing types out there, and let's broaden our horizons a bit and make sure that if someone comes forward, they're not going to be constrained by saying, oh no, I'm sorry, that's too tall or too wide. Just, I don't mean that we have to break our zoning bylaws or our building envelope size, but I think we should be very open to different housing types. Thank you.
Councillor Asmussen.
Well, I'd like to report. I think you guys have done a good job on the criteria, the 4 points there. I do know that I think I'll get a question from some people. I know what's going to happen. It's like you got these 4 early release sites. We've got the criteria of from your urban containment boundary, neighborhood plan, connection to the utility service, and so on. But somebody saying, okay, well, you got these early releases, they build, and then what's going to happen if somebody comes with a application just on the other side of that? To expand it just a little bit at a time? Or is that strictly, this is the boundary, we're now saying everything's going to be a neighborhood plan, there'll be no crossing this line? I just want to know so for the public knows that I could feel some of those questions coming up.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Asmussen. Yeah, the early release sites here are the early release sites, and we bring forward the regular council. part of that report would be endorsing these areas. And we're also bringing forward the MBV Phase 3, the vision, that will identify the other areas in the Northwest Burke vision that require neighborhood planning. So those areas will be required to do neighborhood planning, so you won't just be able to add on to those.
Well, that's good to know. I want to put that out there so people understand that these early releases are just these lands here, and that all the other lands moving forward on the next phase will be part of a report that will have to go through neighborhood planning processes. And in that report, you're going to have a phasing, because I know one group of people up there is the Hazel Drive people, and I guess if they're looking at are they going to be hopefully one of the early ones to look at, or is there still servicing needs that have to be worked out before you decide on that phasing?
Mr. Chair, if I could, I'll take a shot at that, and if Steve or Carl want to add on. Yes, obviously the residents, property owners on Hazel are very keen to get on with the planning for that area. As was noted, there are a number of challenges and things that need to be worked through at this point. We are part of the phasing plan will be looking what would be a logical sequence of doing the neighborhood planning across the area. And logically, you'd start lower down and work your way up the hill. Also, too, you want to take into account the major infrastructure works that would be required. Like, for example, if you're talking about a water reservoir necessary to service an area, and that reservoir may be up or near a park, I think that puts it out a little bit longer term than some of the other closer in works. The other thing, too, we'd have to take into account when we get into the neighborhood planning for that area, because this is where I think we've been more rigorous in our neighborhood planning of late, is looking at what the servicing infrastructure implications are of that. It's one thing to have a plan with a lot of nice designations and colors, but how do you actually deliver on that? And delivering on that would mean roads and water and sewer and so on, some of which would be borne by the city either through our capital works program or DCC projects. So we want to make sure there's a good, strong connection and sequence for that, because there's other projects that the city is being pressed to do as well in that area. So I think it's the combination of those factors that would sort of drive how the neighborhood planning would roll out across the Northwest Burke area. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's good to know, because I think, once again, most of the land is raw, open land with people. These are some people that live in the area, and they're a little more local, so I want to make sure the communication goes out to them clearly on that. It's not going to be imminent on what they're from this vision.
If I could, Mr. Chair, not imminent, but I would suggest it would be coming. At least we'd be recommending that as our upcoming work program. The other thing, too, is we are sensitive that there's been people who have been up there for many, many years. They've had OCP amendment applications that predate my time with the city. We get it. There's an interest to get going. One of the things that we feel through the Northwest Burke vision is not quite like the TDS, the Transit-Oriented Development Strategy, but it does give a sort of a greater clarity for an area about what the future might bring. And with that, I think there's also an understanding and also a greater evaluation of those lands, too. So this is those overlays that Carl was referring to that we think will be helpful for them to see what the future for their lands are.
But I think that's what they want most than anything else, is an understanding or overlay of what could potentially be there. I guess when I look at this here, in some ways I look back that in some ways these lands are sort of a miss in our previous boundaries of our existing lands that probably should have been included, but it's just, so I look at it that way also, that we're sort of correcting maybe a boundary mistake that might have been done before, especially that C2 is an area that's been up for a while. So I think could have been serviced a long time ago. But I also like in the report is your implementation criteria and other considerations that once they early release, they also still have to follow through the process. And because it's just not early release, there's still another process in which they have to follow through that process, regular OCP amendments, the servicing and all that. So I think you guys have done a tremendous job on this report, and I thank you for it.
Thank you. Councillor Marston.
Good. Thank you very much, guys. I think there's a lot of good information here. You obviously recognize the sensitivity of the area with regards to a lot of the long-standing residents, with regards to some certainly want certainty. They want to move forward, and others aren't ready yet. So I think you recognize that. Could you just refresh my memory on the timing for the final North Burke Vision report? We're going to the final stage now. Completion is scheduled for when in 17?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Marsden, we're hoping to bring something forward, a draft vision by the end of the year or right early 2017, and then proceed to our final round of public consultation meeting with the property owners, public open house, and then bring it back. And that would include the phasing plan, infrastructure costing, and associated policies. So we're looking to wrap it up pretty quick.
Okay, so the steps then that are in here, what I'm hearing then is it's not putting these properties significantly ahead of the others in terms of timing, where it's a head start of 6 months, perhaps, before that next piece is done, correct?
Yes, I would say, again, with the Northwest Burke Vision, we are working very hard to get it done as soon as possible, within months.
6 months, I was giving you more than the end of this year. So.
Fair enough, yep.
Okay, all right. I want to echo Councillor Reid's comments with regards to what I'd like to see up there. I think we look at Burke and we've seen a lot of what's gone on, and we're seeing some things that we absolutely love, and some things that, if given the chance to do over again, we might take a second look at it. And one of those, I think, has to do with walls. So I would anticipate that there's some fairly significant slopes even along in these 7 parcels. And so I've used the words before. Councillor Reid speaks to looking at the housing options that are available in there, and I want to see the creativity. Let the land decide what should be there, and in some cases, as opposed to trying to force the wall because it fits our vision of an OCP, let's let the land decide to some degree that perhaps roads and strata and townhouse or row home might just fit better and be more aesthetically pleasing in the long term and more deliverable. So I know we like to be able to say, this fits here, this is what we want to see. And that's really nice when you're not looking at it from a topographical perspective. But once you start to get into there, I think it's really important that we not see 20, 30, 40, 60-foot retaining walls, because I don't know that anybody really wants that view out their backyard. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And for further comments or questions on the proposed framework for early release, Councillor Zerillo and Councillor Wilson.
Well, thank you very much. First thing I want to speak to, and actually I did phone city staff earlier this week because I was really impressed with this report. I was really impressed with the informative nature of the report and the fact that it was easy to read. So I'd like to speak to that first. I got to page 3 and I was like, who wrote this report? This is incredible. So thank you very much for that, and a shout out to all the staff involved in this one. I really appreciated the logical decision tree that comes here. It takes a lot of the political pressure out of this when we have a logical decision tree that says this is really the reasoning behind why we need to do these certain things. So I also wanted to acknowledge today that I've heard some acceptance that development does cost all the taxpayers in the city up on Burke Mountain. I remember when I first got elected, I was told a number of times, and not in the most pleasant way, that all of the development on Burke Mountain is paying for itself. Well, if we need a new reservoir, we need new infrastructure, it's going to cost everybody. And I think I appreciate the opening of that discussion, because I think it's important to understand that infrastructure costs money, and it costs all the taxpayers money, because even once it's built, it needs to be maintained. So I thank you for that. The other thing I wanted to mention was when the report comes, either the end of December or the beginning of the new year, I think we really need to be very assertive with what is possible and what is not possible. I think people have been waiting a long time, and I heard it when I was chairing the meeting when this came back, and I got some feedback from different residents that weren't happy with me, because I guess it was reflected on me because I was chairing the meeting the day it came forward. But at the end of the day, there's some things we can do and some things we can't do. We have the DFO that we have to deal with. We have to deal with the fact that we don't have an endless amount of bridges that we can bring. We need to deal with topography. Like, we just need to be open and transparent about that to our residents, and just sometimes you have to rip off the Band-Aid. So if we need to rip off the Band-Aid, we've got a lot of work to do in the city, and it's very hard for staff to continue to try to move the nutshells. So I commend you on the report. I think it's incredible, and I look forward to those pieces being done quicker. And I think this is a great way to depoliticize this issue. Thank you for that.
Thank you. And for the record, the report was prepared by Aubrey Jensen, Planner 2, and reviewed by Mr. Gawley and Mr. Johansson. And then Mr. McIntyre gets to take credit for it by putting his name on it, signing it. So it's
Sounds
Aubrey.
fair to me.
There you go. Aubrey Jensen. Well, there you go.
Thanks,
Mr.
Aubrey.
Jensen, there you go.
He's the one blushing in the
That's
background.
right, yes, behind that big beard. Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. I'm just going to follow up on what Councillor Marsden was talking about in terms of retaining walls. We had an email, as many might know, about that earlier. And I totally agree. Ideally, we want to let the land dictate what's going to be developed. On these parcels, is it possible to look at them now and anticipate whether there's going to be the opportunity to do more townhousing rather than single-family homes, or whatever is going to reflect the contour better than the large retaining walls?
Mr. Johansson.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Wilson. At a high level, yes. With those overlays, we are looking at certain considerations for different areas. Some areas up there are constrained, they're quite steep, but they've been identified as potentially being developable. So that entails different development types, so yes.
What about the early release parcels, though? They look like they're connected to single-family subdivisions. Will they automatically be considered as single-family, or will they look at a different land use?
I would say that depends on the applications that are brought forward. I would assume that there's some consistency with what's happening across the street. But again, it depends on the applications that are brought forward. The key thing here is that there has to be some consistency with the neighborhood plan as well.
Mr. McIntyre.
Yeah, no, just if I can add to that, no, we're aware of the concern with the growing concern with the retaining walls, and in some cases they're pretty stark. That's something we are looking at in the department right now, and we do want to come back with some updated, maybe more helpful guidelines around that in time, so Council will see that. In the meantime, though, I think it's very helpful today to hear Council voice these concerns. So it's apparent that for these OCP amendments, as Carl has mentioned, and the companion rezoning or subdivisions, whatever it is, there'll be a lot of attention paid to the retaining wall aspect. You know, can we go to a different land use or a different density and building form that is less reliant on retaining walls to create, you know, big flat shells to put single-family houses on. Also, I guess we'd have to look at more closely at the sites and the topography there and what the site really calls for itself.
I'm not 100% reassured by that response, but I know we have to work within what's there. When Mr. Johansson said that it has to be within the current plan, if a proponent wanted to rezone it to something else and it was more conducive to the topography, would obviously, I'm assuming we would encourage that.
The site conditions, the need or not for retaining walls would be one planning consideration, but also you want to take into account other factors as well. If you have, for example, if you have single-family homes on one side of the street, would you want to have towering townhouses right across the street? I don't know. It depends on what sort of setback and setting. So I would just respond that it would be one of a number of considerations that we'd apply in looking at their proposals.
And if I may, we're definitely open to innovation and recognizing the site constraints. Some of those sites are relatively flat, but we also, like Steve mentioned, we have those OCP amendment criteria, and when those applications come in, they get evaluated according to those criteria. So there's opportunity for innovation, but again, there's that criteria that helps to guide that along to council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just one quick thing. So some of those sites are not going to preclude something like Liberty Homes built. where we have the apartment that's almost laying down on the side of the hill and taking full advantage of everything. So that's what I mean by innovation, and just because you call it townhouse doesn't mean it can't be an apartment laying down on its side, sort of, so to speak.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Mr. Johansson.
And when we bring forward the vision, you'll see that as we report on phase 2, that the split between multifamily and single family is much more multifamily now. So there'll be lots of opportunities.
Perfect, thank you.
And I would just add to that, as part of the vision, we are looking at locational criteria for the siting of specific types of land uses such as townhouses as well. So that'll be able to provide property owners and future developers some direction as we do neighborhood plans.
Okay, I think there's been consensus generally on.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, seconded by Councillor Asmundson to receive the report. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 4 is the proposed options for the Austin Heights Neighborhood Center Density Height Review. We have intro comments by the General Manager, Planning and Development, and presentation by the staff before you.
Yes. Some people have been waiting 5.5 years for this.
Yes, and I'm wanting to speak to it.
Okay, you'll be the first one to speak then.
Only because I took all the...
Yes. So, Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I know we've all been waiting a while for this one. It's been out there for some period of time. And what I'm referring to is the high-rise development moratorium set in place for the Austin Heights Commercial Center. It goes back a number of years, and it's something we've been meaning to get to. We've had other work we've been focused on in the Southwest, but with that other work moving to completion and recognizing that there's been considerable growing interest, which is encouraging for land assembly and redevelopment in the heart of Austin Heights. We thought it was timely to get on with this work now. So Carl and Steve have a presentation for an approach. I think it has some background and history on it for some of the new council members, because just a few of us around the table that were here back in 2011. And so there's 3 options for tackling the situation we're in, and we're recommending option 3 for the committee's consideration. We're here today, again, for information and discussion. If you have some feedback for us, we'd welcome that, and then we come back to council for a formal endorsation for an approach going forward. My last comment is I would really make a pitch for let's settle on an option that brings Austin Heights into consistency with the other urban centers in Coquitlam. I'm thinking of Coquitlam Lougheed and City Center. We've got some pretty good plans and planning policies and work with the zoning and density bonusing and that. We got a little bit of an oddity in Austin Heights. I think there's an opportunity to address that, bring it into line, but at the same time provide for the development interests is out there. So that would be my pitch. So on that, over to Carl.
So you're saying that at the very least option 2, but you'd like option 3. And so you consider receipt of this report, if it gets moved and seconded and passed, as supporting option 3 at this stage, unless you hear otherwise.
Well, no, we're following the practice of coming to committee for an initial consideration, discussion, and questions. We would then, our intention would be to come back to a regular council meeting for formal endorsement, because it would be based on a council resolution, given that the moratorium was put in place by council resolution.
Okay, so we'll wait to hear what people say. So there's further elaboration. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Good afternoon once again, Acting Mayor and Council. So today we'd like to present for Council's feedback potential options to address the 2011 Council resolution that placed a moratorium on high-rises in the Austin Heights neighborhood. So here's the resolution, which came out of the public hearing on the Austin high-rise, which is now it's been constructed. I won't repeat it word for word, but it's very clear that high-rise applications are to be withheld until building heights are reviewed in the context of the neighborhood center policies that are in the Austin Heights plan and the C5 zone, otherwise known as community commercial. And that zone has no height limit and allows high-rise opportunities. Based on this, we're bringing forward these options to address the building height issues, but not redo the Austin plan. And we've also done some preliminary work to help illustrate current policy in this area. Okay, so before we get into this, let's do a brief visual tour of the Austin Heights Neighborhood Center. You can see here is Austin Avenue, and for context, you have Blue Mountain Park and a golf course over here. This is looking a little bit more northerly, closer in. And this area is a really thriving area with many local businesses and larger stores. As you know, we have the Safeway here and the Rona here. And this is a view looking east down Austin Avenue from Blue Mountain. And you can see here how the pattern of development is, most of it is of the low-rise, more suburban form that's developed over the past 30 to 40 years. And in the foreground, we have the recently completed 19-story high-rise known as the Austin.
Yeah, I know.
One of the key intents of the Austin plan is to revitalize the built form of this area through incremental, more urban and pedestrian-friendly redevelopment. Through pulling the buildings up to the street fronting retail, improved sidewalks, plazas, and amenities. But in order for that redevelopment to happen, there needs to be a certain level of building density or square footage available for prospective developers on their properties in order to move that forward. So now taking it to the street level, these views here at the east end of Austin, looking east and southeast, again show a large variety of small businesses that make up this. It's a really thriving area, and it's that commercial heart of that part of southwest Coquitlam. But it's also evident that there's, the streetscapes are of a little older vintage. Now we have a little bit broader sidewalks and boulevards and street trees with redevelopment. So there is a need for some of those improvements and opportunities for those. And as we move into the core of the neighborhood center between Marmont and out to Blue Mountain, you can see some of the properties here that are looking to redevelop. Of course, we have the Safeway site here, and there's an council-approved development permit on this site. And to redevelop the store, bring it to the street, improve the sidewalks, and that sort of thing. Now, going back to the original intent of the plan, redevelopment can work to improve the built environment on an incremental basis and also support the area and really help to help it evolve and change and grow as the city evolves and changes as well. So here's a few more images showing the west end of Austin, including the Rona site on the south side and the recently completed Austin at the intersection of Blue Mountain and Austin. And lastly, we have the Ridgeway corridor that just north of Austin, parallel. Again, has a lot of small businesses there, but there's also opportunities for streetscape enhancements, as the back end of the Safeway with that development permit was bringing to retail and streetscapes and that sort of thing. Okay, so in the Austin plan, as I've previously noted, the neighborhood center policies look to encourage redevelopment in a way that complements the existing commercial uses and looks to enhance the public realm. Now, these policies, along with the zone in the zoning bylaw, also note the available densities, the building densities that are available, expressed as floor area ratios, or FARs, including a base density of 3.0 and the ability to go higher with bonusing. So if you provide public amenities, financial contributions, you can go up to 4 FAR, and if you have a landmark building, which I'll talk about in a moment, you can go up to 5.5 FAR, which is actually the highest in the city relative to city center and Burke. So how does, just briefly, FAR essentially determines the allowable square footage or floor space of a building on a specific property. So how does FAR work? For example, if a property has an FAR of 2, it can have a floor space or density that's 2 times the area of that property or the lot. Simply put, if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, you can have 20,000 square feet of floor space. And when you translate that to how it affects building heights, if you look at the available square footage on a property and you apply a lot coverage, you see in the middle image there you have 20,000 square feet that covers the whole site and results in 2 stories. But if the lot coverage goes to half the site, or 50%, you get 4 stories, and so on. If you get 25%, you're up to 8. So relating this back to the plan FARs, a range of redevelopment, building form, and height scenarios are possible, including low-rise and high-rise buildings. And the larger the site, the more floor space that can be generated and the more ability to have a high-rise building on those properties, especially when you apply the concept of high-rises have a smaller floor plate. For example, the Austin high-rise has a lot coverage. The high-rise itself has a lot coverage of 25%. So what we're going to do is we're just going to show the properties in the Austin Heights Neighborhood Center that where this FAR applies and illustrate that a little bit further. So here's the aerial showing the yellow outline of the neighborhood center, which is the area that we're looking at. There's the neighborhood center land use. And to the north, we have the medium density apartments. So that allows apartments between 4 and 8 stories high. And we have some of that land use to the south as well. But we also have this large area of neighborhood attached residential or housing choices, which is a lower density, lower rise building form, which has implications for building heights in this area, which I'll get into in a moment. But if just a brief moment for Jim just to speak a little bit about the area that we're proposing to look at for this study.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just very briefly, we focused on the Austin Heights Commercial Center because that's where the original resolution was addressing. We have had inquiries on some of the properties to the south and west about going to higher density, and we're not proposing to include that in this piece of work now. We're trying to make this a focused piece of work to be done within a year and to enable those development interests that are focused on Austin Ave and the core to go ahead. We're reluctant to cast the net wider. It would bring in more lands, more issues. And given our recent experience coming out of the Coquitlam-Lougheed neighborhood plan with the Austin West area, there was quite an organized, concerted pushback from the community. We think let's just stick with the core area of Austin Heights rather than looking too far afield in terms of revisiting and updating other land uses and densities. So I just wanted to put that up to council this afternoon.
Thanks, Jim. And I will be brief in this section, hand it over to Steve, but it is a meaty issue, and there's a lot of nuances. So in terms of the neighborhood center policies in the plan, it actually, like the previous slide showed, it assigns FARs to the potential for properties that have certain densities. So if you look at all the properties in blue here in the neighborhood center, could conceivably achieve an FAR of 4.0 with that bonusing. And given current market conditions, that's not an unreasonable assumption. But it's also important to point out with my mouse arrow here, there's properties with the red hatches that are actually limited to 4 stories in the plan. You cannot go above 4 stories because they're adjacent to that housing choices land use. So what that means is only about 80% of the properties in the neighborhood center could get to a 4 or high rise. Okay, so going to the next slide, just talking a little bit more about the policy, and this actually shows the recent Austin redevelopment here and also the 3-story business center, Megan Business Center that was recently constructed. So in addition to the 4 FAR in blue, there's a landmark site policy that allows for up to 5.5 FAR, 5 times the lot area, at these major intersections at Marmot and Austin and at the east and west end. Now, so in order to get the 5.5, you have to deliver amenities, and the building has to be of a high architectural quality, even higher than the ones around it. Now, many of these sites are quite small, as you can see. And in order to achieve enough floor space to get that high-rise form, you'd have to assemble those properties. And there's a lot of different permutations in the neighborhood center. So there's a lot of opportunities for low-rise and high-rise. For example, if you take 2 of these lots and apply 2 of the smaller lots and apply 5.5 to it, you may only be able to get a 10-story building. But if you look at 4 or 5 or 6 of those lots put together, you get 20 to 25-story buildings. So it depends on lot coverage, or lot assembly. And some of the larger properties are able to achieve that as well. So just a little bit of context in terms of what is happening in the neighborhood center right now. So with that intro, I'm going to hand things over to Steve, who's going to run through those options for us.
So staff are proposing 3 options for undertaking a density and height review for the Austin Heights Neighbourhood Centre. Option 1 would involve council passing a resolution to lift the 2011 moratorium. As just described by Carl and shown on the current density potential slide, this would allow for the use of the existing neighborhood plan's height and density policies through the application of the C5 zone, which currently has no height limit. High-rise rezoning applications would be considered by council on a case-by-case basis to the city's rezoning process. In considering this option, it should be noted that the Austin Heights Neighborhood Plan does not specifically identify amenities to be provided through density bonusing. As a result, if the current C5 bonusing system continues after the moratorium is lifted, the provision of amenities will be determined on an ad hoc basis and may not include contributions to the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. To facilitate this option, staff would bring forward a report for council's consideration to allow for the processing of high-rise applications. If pursued, this option could be completed by the end of 2016. So option 2 involves a technical review of the neighborhood center height and density policies and brings the C5 zone in line with the citywide density bonusing program. Through this option, height limits would be considered. The starting point for the review would be the public feedback from the Austin rezoning application back in 2011. Staff would use this feedback to undertake architectural testing to review building heights in the neighborhood center. This option provides an opportunity to bring the C5 zone in line with the citywide density bonusing program by setting specific density bonusing structure that would allow contributions to both amenities and to the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund, as is currently the case with the C4, C7, RM4, RM5, and RM6 zones. Based on the findings of the technical review, staff would bring forward proposed OCP and rezoning bylaw amendments. Public feedback on proposed changes would be received through the city's standard OCP amendment process, which involves a mail out to property owners and key neighborhood stakeholders such as the Austin Heights BIA. A public hearing on proposed OCP and zoning bylaw amendments would also provide an opportunity to seek public feedback. This option could be completed by mid-2017. So option 3 would include the same technical review of the height and density, the C-Zone 5, and the density bonusing program just described in option 2. This option also includes an online survey and a community information session or open house seeking public feedback on any proposed changes prior to staff bringing forward OCP and zoning bylaw amendments for council's consideration. Staff would encourage that option 3 be considered as it is in line with more recent neighborhood planning processes. Because of the time needed to undertake this technical review, conduct the online survey, and organize the community information session, option 3 would be completed by the end of 2017 with a mind to undertake an expedient process. So following council and community's feedback on the proposed options, staff will prepare a report outlining a proposed scope and process for council's consideration before the end of the year. That's our presentation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reid.
Okay, my favorite spot.
Is it?
Well, not really. As Councillor Asmundson will remember, it was quite the contentious issue back when we first went into this, and I really have lots to say about this. So the owners, we have had such extensive public consultation up there. I don't know how many meetings you guys went to, but it was a lot. And technically, not much has changed since then, as far as putting the high rises in and redoing all the buildings. So in this part of the city, I'll just scoot through my notes as I have them. We have probably the most successful BIA in this area. They have done wonders, but they need some incentives, and we need to move forward quickly, and we need to revitalize. And now is the time. if we even get an application today, we'll be in the ground maybe within 2 years and starting, up the walls. But it takes time, as we all know, so nothing's going to happen tomorrow. A lot of the owners in there are already aware and are already consolidating. I think it would be interesting for staff to have a meeting with the owners of the properties along that line to find out who is. We don't want any little orphan spots left that, are going to create a problem for us. And perhaps if the owners, and a lot of them are very sophisticated owners and a lot of them aren't, and those that aren't, your way of explaining to them that they can probably make a lot more money by consolidating is good. The other thing for me is consolidation makes for a better neighborhood. We need a plan, and it needs to be comprehensive, and it needs to work, and they all need to flow into each other. And I think the owners of these properties have to know that. For the folks that are new on council, originally this plan went from Marmont to Nelson, and it made absolutely no sense to some of us at all. So we extended it right along to Gatensbury and then right along to Blue Mountain. And one of the reasons was we have the Royal Canadian Legion, who are full of our veterans, and it's their building. And I wanted to make sure they had an opportunity to increase their building, like a lot of them have done in other areas, and it provides low-cost housing for some of the veterans and seniors. So we have lots of opportunities here, but to me, this is a neighborhood. This is where I want to see families. This is where I want to see affordable housing. So the affordable housing part of all these developments is big to me. And so I think we have to somehow change the rules for that. So as far as I'm concerned, I'd be going option 1, cancel the moratorium and charge ahead. But I always do that anyhow. So it's important to me that we get the affordable housing in there somehow. Rental buildings, it would be lovely if someone would build rental buildings. And so I think that's a meeting we need to have with some of the owners. Having a further 1.5 FAR for landmark sites, that's great, but it better be something spectacular. I'm giving away a lot of density for architectural things, and when we have to up our game for the architectural. It has to be upped, way up. I want this to be something really spectacular. You go over and look at Surrey Centre, you look at what they're doing at Lougheed Mall. It's nice stuff, and I want to see some of that here. And we've all known from the trip that we've taken, it doesn't have to be costly. We saw one that I think Councillor Wilson quite enjoyed, the housing. You'd never know there was, housing in all those beautiful brick ground-oriented places. We have all from this, even this where we're talking about now, to Blue Mountain, we have tremendous opportunities in this area. So I want to get on with it. Quickly moving through. I want to make sure we provide view corridors. That's a biggie for me. And I think I'd like to see a mix of high-rise and low-rise, which I think you do too. I'd like to see a lot of boutique places where you can walk from high-rise to low-rise. And I think at one time when Safeway was looking, we were going to have quite a lot of walkability between on Ridgeway and around, and restaurants. And we have an opportunity now, so let's not let it go. Let's do all the fluff stuff. I have something you've said in stage 1 under option 2, that the architectural testing of alternate density and height scenarios would be undertaken. Well, we have a whole bunch of developers out there who have their own architects and who will come in, and someone's not going to come in that's with something totally unsuited for the neighborhood, because it isn't going to do their architectural prize any benefit at all. So I think, instead of planning sort of redoing the whole thing, I think we can sort of work with developers and speed that up. Building heights, I think when we do have a public hearing with everyone, I think people need an education on what things could look like. So I would hope that staff would bring out Town Centre and Coquitlam and show folks what these zones mean, so that they would get an idea about what density is. And I'm opposed to waiting till the end of 2017 for this. That's way too far off, especially when we went through, I would say, about 18 months of public hearings and more public hearings and changing this and changing that. And you know you're going to get the same folks out that just don't want development. Well, you know, it's a new year. 9 years later, we're still there. So I'm in favor of option 1, which I probably think some of the things I want you to look into, like the affordable housing and things like that, so that developers can get more FAR. But I don't know if I'd have to settle for option 2, but I want to move, and I want to move now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification, Councillor Reid, because I was going to actually just on behalf of council seek some clarification from the planner here on the nature of option 1, 2, and 3, or basic option 1 very clearly just lift the moratorium and go. Option 2 and 3 were both, though, looking at just densities and FAR, essentially. It's not to open up the Austin Heights Neighborhood Center plan again. And it seems to me that a lot of us might have ideas about Councillor Reid has some great ideas about what she'd like to see there, but would that not involve opening up the whole plan again to do that? When all you're looking at right now is just essentially the FARs, the density and heights. Is that not right? So what would it take to? I mean, if other people on council have ideas about that are different than what the Austin Heights Neighborhood Center calls for, or maybe everything that she's said is already in there. Is already in there anyway. So it's can you comment on that, Mr. McIntyre?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. What we're looking at, even with option 2, I would see it's more sort of a surgical review and update to the neighborhood plan. It's going in and looking at those specific policies that have resulted in what we've got there now, and making those changes to those policies and the companion zoning, so it would bring it in line. I think in doing that, though, we could achieve some of the aspirations I just heard mentioned around affordable housing and rental and that sort of thing. No, it's not our intention to do a full-blown review of the neighborhood plan, going from one end to the other, cover to cover, and do a review. No, it's more a very focused examination. And maybe times like the terminology like architectural testing may sound like a lot more than it is, but it's basically it's to do sort of kind of the analysis that Carl was showing earlier, so people could get it about around the merit or the benefit of land assemblies, what this would translate into in some building height and massing. So, Mr. Chair, we're welcome for the direction from committee today, and if that's the sense is to more focus, get on with the exercise, we can tackle that.
And option 2 does contain within it the need for an OCP amendment and therefore a public hearing, so there would be some public input at that stage too, at option 2. Okay. Councillor Marsden also wants to speak.
Thank you. A number of similar thoughts to Councillor Reid. Questions with regards to the affordable housing strategy that we put out, and the comments in the report that this particular area, if we went with option 1, you wouldn't have the tools available, essentially, that we've got in our affordable housing strategy. Is that correct, or it wouldn't create the funding into the?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Marsden. We have that density bonusing structure in our C4 and C7 zones, and as Steve mentioned, the residential ones like RM6, where there's in the zoning bylaw, it's laid out in terms of if you go above 2.5 to 3 or 3.5 for FAR, there's a certain contribution that's made to amenities, and between 3.5 and 4, for example, a certain contribution that goes to the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund, and that's what's contained in the housing affordability strategy. Right now, it would be on if the moratorium was lifted, it would be on an ad hoc basis. We don't have an actual defined amenities plan in the Austin Heights plan right now. So if we brought the zone into the system, the citywide system like C4 and C7, then we would be able to apply that structure, and there would be more predictability there, and it would be able to support the Affordable Housing Fund as Council has envisioned it through the strategy.
Okay. because I would certainly see that this is an area that needs to participate in the Affordable Housing Fund. It needs to be that. I get that from a consistency perspective, that we want it there. So, because I'm really seeing, I think, between options 1 and 2, that's the big difference, is whether or not there's that participation on a consistent basis in the fund. I mean, I'm all for consistency, but I do agree that this has been on the back burner for a long time. A lot of uncertainty. Option 3 has got, again, that depth of community consultation to it. I get that. I haven't seen anything in the last little bit that would suggest that the consultation is going to yield a different piece of feedback than we got when the Austin Heights plan was initially put together. So I think community feedback is going to be very consistent. So waiting till the end of 2017 to get information that we're pretty certain we've already got. I mean, people didn't want too high. Your comments about FAR of 5.5 being the highest in the city, I would suggest that if you say that to the public, as you have on camera, they're going to look and say, well, that means it's the tallest towers in the city. But that's not always the case. The FAR number and the height of the tower aren't necessarily married at the hip. They can be, but they're not. So I think, again, being very, very cautious about messaging and putting out there, I don't think anybody would envision that the tallest towers that we have in Coquitlam would be in Austin Heights. I certainly don't envision that. And I know you wouldn't have to take any staff resources to do community consultation to find that out, because everybody would say that's not what we envision. No one wants that the highest. So that said, I'm struggling to see what more we get option 3 versus option 2. And option 1 to option 2 is really just we're going to get some uniformity with regards to the Housing Affordability Fund. Is that correct?
That's public hearing.
And the city's existing overall density bonusing system.
Okay, the consistency. So then, as much as I think we do need to move forward, I think we do have to have consistency with it, which kind of leads me towards number 2. If there was a way to deliver the density piece, the consistency, and that in the time frame of option 1, I'd be all over it. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Asmussen and Councillor Zarrillo would like to speak as well.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the report. I think it's a good report. When I look at this and I go back with Councillor Reid on this, we had one of the most involved community input sessions that we've ever had. And we've had a tremendous amount of meetings. That's where housing choices also came out of the consultation within this. And, you know, the people bought into the whole concept. And it was a mixed use because we had towers, then in between the towers, we had lower mid-rise density to break up the massing of it. And people really liked the look of it. Now, we had the application for the ones that are at 24 stories. And through some people that said they weren't informed, which I find that difficult. But anyways, that was their feeling at that time. There was some pushback, and we reduced down to 19 stories. And I've sort of regretted the fact that it was reduced down to 19 stories. And ever since it's been there, I've really never heard any real, I don't know if Councillor Reid has or whatever, a lot of negative pushback about the building on the corner, the heights of the building or anything. I think people like the building on the corner. I think it's been a good addition to the corner. So that, I think, tells a story to me about the issue and how it's reacted in the public there. And that gets me to think that option 1, I think, is we don't want to use that because it omits some of the density bonusing and stuff like that, keeps us in a situation that's going to handicap us in some ways moving forward. So I think going to option 2 is an option that opens up, as Councillor Marsden said, the density bonusing thing, our CACs, opens us into our affordable housing strategy, and moves us into those things that we want to have with this in this area. We want to have more market rental in this area, and we want to have ways to achieve that. And so I think that's a very important part of moving forward on those next 2 options. We have to have that. Landmark locations, giving them their 1.5 FSR for a landmark site, to me, I don't know if that is required. I think when I look at a landmark site, I look at what May and I have talked about as a more iconic or more, and they're not that, as we found out in our tour, they're not that really overly expensive to do. So I don't know if giving away a 1.5 density to say we want you to make a building look nicer is worth the 1.5. So I don't agree with that point in there. I would rather see the potential of pushing for all the buildings to have a unique and good look that meets design criteria that we're looking for and adding to it. I would rather see then, if we're looking at that, where we have that 1% for affordable housing contributions, if they can put more market rentals or something within a site somewhere else, I would rather see something like that added in rather than going that far. I'm leaning towards and supporting option 2. I think people have waited a long time for an answer on this. I think we've done a lot of consultation. I think we are going to go out with doing some analysis, put the information out there for the public. We're going to have that out there. We'll have a public hearing on it. We'll have notification on it. And we'll get some answers back. We may move forward. We may make adjustments at that point depending on the public feedback. But I think that's probably one of the better ways to go at this time. But I look at some of the landmark sites, and I look at Nelson Street, and, I look at one of the largest pieces of land there for assembly with its commercial, and to be, I don't know why you'd have that more as a landmark site or something in the design, because as May said, you're needing to consolidate certain other areas for landmark sites where that site there has a lot of potential. And I think, you're not dealing with multiple landowners. So I think that's something we could look at as a site moving towards the fort. I don't know if there's traffic considerations or whatever issues on that. When I look at the whole thing for the lack of land assembly needed in that one there at the corner of Nelson and Austin.
Which one are you talking about?
Nelson, Austin.
Where the south of Austin, right where it says, you go Nelson, Austin, the largest block there. Come down. No.
Southwest?
South. Where the John B. and the Rona and all that in there. In that area there.
There's no iconic site there.
No, he wants one.
I said there's no iconic site, but I said that if you're going to do any high-rise or land, it's a site that is, if you take what they're doing in Burnaby with their malls, it's a commercial site.
Again, that's reopening the Austin Heights Neighborhood Center.
It's just a suggestion. I'm not suggesting, but I'm saying it's something we can look at down the road. Okay. But I do think, though, that option 2 gets us out onto the issues resolved, gets us out there before the end of 2017, gets us about mid-2017 or so to get this out there, get this done, and then start moving forward. And I think that's probably a better way to go. That's where I'd be leaning when it comes back to council.
Thanks very much, Councillor Asmussen. Councillor Zerillo?
Okay, well, I guess the first thing that pops into my mind is that I think we've made a commitment as a city that we're going to have unique neighborhoods. I think that we've talked about it, that neighborhoods should be unique, they should remain unique. So the last thing I would want to see is just a reproduction of what's happening at City Centre or what's happening in Coquitlam or even what's happening at Lougheed. This is a little gem of a pocket. There's a very strong attachment to this area by the people not only that live in the south of Coquitlam, but all across Coquitlam that remember this area. So I would hate to lose the uniqueness of the area. That would be my first comment. So my second comment is about what has been traditionally a commercial area now where the whole conversation today is focused about residential. Although there may be commercial happening at the bottom floors, we're talking about flipping something from commercial to residential. And in the conversations that I've had with residents in the area, one of their biggest concerns is keeping some sort of affordability. So really that's not really talking about what's inside of these yellow framework, but it's what's talking about what's behind the yellow framework. Howie, King Albert, some of those areas behind. So I don't think we can necessarily do this in isolation, and I would want to know how are those areas going to be affected, because it's a frog in the pot where you start gentrification and then all of a sudden we lose a whole bunch of affordable housing again behind the scenes. So that would be my comment about that. Also, we're also in a different era of affordability now than we were when we made the Austin plan. We're talking more about affordability than we ever did. I know it's an issue, but I wouldn't want to change directions just because we need to react to something like that. I think we need to maintain the affordable housing that is in that area, and we need to have a, not necessarily a promise, but some sort of commitment to the community that those areas are going to stay, or that we're talking about keeping affordability in that area, because new real estate is not affordable unless it's subsidized. It just isn't. Question, what is happening with the Safeway? It was alluded to at the beginning that we were expecting the Safeway, and I'm just wondering what's happening with the Safeway.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Zerillo. As I mentioned before, Council approved a development permit for the reconstruction of the Safeway site, now owned by Sobeys. And as a part of that, there were 2 residential parcels, or mixed-use parcels. Actually, the Austin plan itself has required commercial frontages in certain areas, so we don't lose that ability for commercial. But that DP, or development permit, did identify future sites on that property for mixed use, including residential development. And my understanding is that the applicant is considering their options.
Okay, so we aren't going to get the Safeway as we saw it. They're looking at doing something different there.
Through the chair, they've been weighing their options. As Carl mentioned, the Safeway plan was based on going ahead with the store sort of at the center of the holding, with the opportunity to add towers at either end at some point in the future. Things like the parkade design would be based on having knockout panels so you can connect with future buildings to either side. I think with the change in ownership at Safeway, there's been a re-examination of that project, and there's what we're hearing is there's developers that are been talking with the owner about interest in developing the site. The one challenge would be if they're going to go ahead with the Safeway construction. It's not impossible to build a store and then add on towers at some point in time. It would be more around meeting the parking needs, because the grocery store, of course, takes up the bulk of the site. So you want to take advantage of that to have as much parking there as you could. So I think they're looking at that in terms of possibly revising the development permit drawings to provide for an extra level of parking that would then facilitate towers being added at some point in the future on either end.
Okay, so answer to my question is we're not going to see that store as we saw it come.
Oh, I'm sorry, no, the more direct answer, the store would be still the same. It's very much an urban store built out to the street, and also addressing the Ridgeway frontage as well.
Our understanding is that Safeway Sobeys is wanting to remain in Austin Heights.
Yeah. So 2 more comments. One is about the FARs. I mean, the FARs hardly mean anything to the community. It was alluded to here, somebody mentioned it, that just because we say 5.5, people are going to think it's super tall. Well, it depends on how big the piece of land is. So I think we need to find a better way to talk to our community about heights. So last comments are about the idea that we put a moratorium in place in the first place, and now we're going to maybe start asking for what I would consider some different hoops for the people in that area. They've already been penalized, in my opinion, over the last few years of not being able to have as much flexibility in the use of their land as others. So I would be concerned about making them have to go through too many hoops. I remember when the Meegans came in before I was elected, I remember coming in and the Meegans had to go through a whole bunch of hoops to get where they were at, and I remember council had to step in at the last moment around it. So I am concerned that it's a small amount of owners, and to go back to the community with something that we've already talked about, that we already have a plan about, doesn't seem to make much sense to me. But I certainly would be tenuous about coming back to this community and saying, now we want this kind of money and we want these kind of things for you to bring forward for your developments. Because at the end of the day, there needs to be some refreshing and revitalization around that community. The community deserves it. And I think I'm open to looking at that. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Cirillo. I am keeping track of the stated option preferences for each speaker. What do we put you down as?
Well, we've got to vote on them anyhow.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm just.
No, I don't have a decision as of yet.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson, then Councillor Towner.
Thanks. When we went on the tour with Jim Hulbert, he stressed a variety of times how we need to have the whole spectrum of housing. So in this area, and we also talked at length about transit corridors and the importance of having below market rental housing in close to transit corridors. So in this area here that we're looking at, how do we get below market rental housing?
Through the chair, yeah, that's a tough one. But more seriously, there are policies in the existing plan, in the existing neighborhood plan, and perhaps Councillor Reid can help us with that. Because I know when we went through the neighborhood plan process, we were well aware of the stock of, it's a mix of rental and quite affordable strata condo ownership in that area, that belt between the Austin Heights Commercial Center up to the park and school. And so in that plan, there were a number of policies, and I can't call them offhand, but we can pull those out that tried to get into that, about not wanting to, through the neighborhood plan, throw the gates wide open, that there'd be, evictions and redevelopment happening, which hasn't happened. So there are some policies in the plan that address that. I think, too, the comment was made about how the plans, the systems have evolved in time since 2011, 2010, when the neighborhood plan was done. And I think we're much further ahead. I think we're much better positioned now, certainly with the housing affordability strategy around some of the policies, some of the incentives we're seeing in that. And in fact, even a more recent piece, and this is starting to come evident, is the additional FAR for affordable housing, which we're often seeing as being rental. So I think that can be part of the solution to getting to what you're looking for, Councillor Wilson, around affordable and/or rental housing in that area. And again, I think that would be one of the benefits by bringing this area into line with our existing density bonusing and policy system, because it works better, works more hand in hand with the housing affordability strategy.
Are we assuming, though, that towers along Austin would be around the 19-story height or substantially higher? Like, I know we don't know at this point, but if we're going to get extra rental because of increases in FAR, it's going to probably be a lot higher than 19 stories. So if the public is saying no to tall towers, how do we get below market housing? We're going to lose a ton of affordable housing in the Howie, King Albert area. This is like a mini Coquitlam, and some of the most affordable housing in the city is slated to be turned into 5 to 8 story condos. And I don't believe our housing affordability strategy is strong enough to protect or replace any of those affordable units. So this is my concern. If we don't do it in the center area, there's very little chance of it happening north of the center area.
Not much in the center.
Sorry, I don't know if you had something to say, Carl. Cut you off.
Joe Hanson.
Yes, through Chair to Councillor Wilson. Like Jim mentioned, that the land use north of the neighborhood center is limited to 4 to 8 stories, the medium density, and that was a conscious decision. There's a huge amount of rental stock in there. It's well used. It's there for the community. And actually, Austin Avenue is slated to become part of the TransLink's frequent transit network as funding becomes available, as there's more people on the line to make that happen. as we look at this further, we'd be looking at scenarios like FAR 4, for example. What does that mean in terms of, is it a high-rise? Is it a high-rise with, townhouses or apartment podium? There's a lot of ways you can shape that, and there's opportunities along Austin for rental housing and that sort of thing. So we want to make sure that that's looked at. And like I said before, the scenarios, the permutations along Austin, because of the different lot sizes, there's a lot of them. There's high rises, there's low rises, there's mid rises. But when we looked at, like, say, for example, some of those smaller lots on the north of Austin, just east of Marmot, if you assembled 5 or 6 of those, you could get high rises that are in the 22 to 25 story range if you went all the way to 5.5. But again, there's lots of permutations. There could be people coming forward with towers at 20 stories or 15 as well.
I mean, we hear over and over again that the land along the SkyTrain line is too valuable, and the only way to get, real, below market rental housing is along transit corridors, which is this, like you say, it's going to be great service. So,
Councillor Wilson, can I ask you, below market rental housing, are you mean subsidized rental housing?
Yes.
Then? Okay.
That's what I wanted to talk about.
The current bonus density strategy, or whatever it would be termed in this area, you say it doesn't line up with our current bonus density for the rest of the city and that sort of thing. If we aligned it with our current system, would that mean more bonus density for the city or less bonus density for the city compared to what it is right now?
Take a bit of a shot at this, but it would, I think it would result in greater contributions to the city, because our density bonus system is fairly it's rigorous and it's set out that there's a valuation for that process, a portion of which is provided to the city upon rezoning. Right now, the neighborhood plan for Austin Heights it's more of a let's sit down and discuss and negotiate what your contributions would be to get that additional density, and to some where the landmark site density bonusing is, come in with a stunning design and you'll get an extra 1.5. Well, what's stunning? In the eyes of the designer, it may be quite attractive, but to others it may not. So it just leaves things just a little bit too much to speculation and negotiation ultimately. So what we're saying is, under the density bonusing system we have elsewhere in the city, there is a clear, straightforward system for arriving at those numbers.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a preference on option 1, 2, or 3?
I would prefer option 3.
Councillor Tanner?
Thank you. First of all, I want to start off by saying I was really excited to see this report come forward. When I moved to Coquitlam 20 years ago, that neighborhood was being discussed about being revitalized, or so I heard. So I'm excited to hear it, to see it finally coming through. I spend a lot of the services I go to are in that area. I'm there weekly with my kids, the dentist, the massage, whatever, the optical, the shop. So I'm up there talking to people all the time. So I'm really happy to see this. So I've made a bunch of notes. I don't really want to repeat what everybody said, but I was confused because I wasn't around. But I read that it was up to 2.5 years of very fulsome public consultation to come up with the neighborhood plan, which included high-rises.
Yes.
So I don't really understand why a neighborhood plan after 2.5 years of consultation, then a moratorium on high-rises. So I'm confused about that. So got that out. I'm really glad that we aren't going back to open up the neighborhood plan. When I first read it, I thought, well, no, we did 2.5 years. The people spoke. I don't want to go back to public consultation. It's done. But I also, a lot has changed in the housing market since then, and I think I know, you know, I think even society knows, the community knows, that we need more purpose-built rental, we need more accessible housing. The single-family houses in that neighborhood are 1 million, 1.5, 2.5 million. So we know we need more units, we need more housing for people that can't buy a single-family house, and we need patrons to support the shops and services in that area. So the fact that people didn't want high-rises, anyways, I wasn't around. I also want to say I circled the paragraph here that says, to staff's knowledge, no negative feedback regarding traffic or the presence of the high-rise at Austin and Blue Mountain has been received. But I have to tell you, I've only heard positive. Even people that were against it and whatever happened back in 2011 have since bought in it. They sold their house in Maillardville and moved in there, and they like it because they can do their laundry by an elevator or in suite rather than up to their basement in their house, and they can go to their bank and their cafe without having to go downstairs and drive. So I've only heard positive things. People love it. It's pretty. It's appealing. And from a distance when you're driving in Burnaby and you can see it, it looks nice. So I haven't heard anything negative. Another thing we learned about on our tour is I know a lot of people get concerned about the height, but it's not so much the height of the buildings. It's the connectivity, what goes on the ground in between. It's the walkability, it's the sense of place, it's what you do on the ground between the developments, not so much what's happening up in the air that's important. I was also going to bring up the same concerns as Chris. I'm working on an initiative right now. And you guys all know I'm working with the refugee families, and a family got flooded out of their suite. They need to find somewhere to live, and spent the weekend phoning around and trying to find rental, and there's nothing. There's no vacancies in that neighborhood, nothing. And so that just goes to show you what the need is for rental. So if we have to go a little higher to get some rental and subsidized housing, then I think that's what we have to think about. Anyways, I just am happy to hear that we're not reopening the whole planning process. And although I don't really want to wait till the end of 2017, I also think we've already waited this long. We have to do it right. So I'd love to see this get moving, but at the same time, this is a great report, lots of great information, but we have to get it right. So. Thanks.
So is that 2 or 3?
2 or 3.
Okay.
I don't know yet.
Thank you. I haven't spoken yet, and I'm definitely number 2, but partial number 1 as well. And I have a question, sort of an observation, and about density bonusing, and density bonusing. We talk about it around the table as a way of, okay, this is how we get money to pay for amenities and things like that. But it also, does it not create a sense of uncertainty then in the neighborhood? If we know that the FAR is 4 and everybody's kind of, let's say the community is really tuned in, they know what that means, they know if it's a bigger lot it can go higher, but then, so they think they know what they've got when they've got this plan in place. But then if they know that, then if they hear that a developer can buy their way to a higher density and therefore a taller building, doesn't that lead to some uncertainty? Maybe that's one of the problems with the system, and maybe that would be a problem in an area where there's been. I wasn't on council when this happened, but I was watching it, where there's been this real concern over the height. So in one way, if you say, you're saying if you go for option 2, it's in order to get everything in line with having the right density bonusing and the housing affordability strategy in there. But at the same time, it might also sort of send a signal that you can, and that the people might not like, about, okay, well, so you said already that it's done on an ad hoc basis now. But has there been any consideration given? It's just out there, just saying, actually, in this neighborhood, there's not going to be any density bonusing, and so we'll have some more certainty about what can be built there. And this is something that we can do for the neighborhood. So it's still going to be some towers there, especially if it's a bigger lot that's assembled at 4.0 or 5.5 for the landmark sites. There's still going to be good-sized towers there, but above that, that's nothing. I've never heard this discussed around council, and I hadn't thought of it until this came up. Mr. McIntyre, any response to that or thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's an intriguing question. I'll provide a few comments, and I think Carl would like to have some thoughts as well. Firstly, the density bonusing system, it's at the developer's option, but it's all what's provided in the zoning. So, if, for example, if someone wants to know, well, what can you build in the C4 zone or the C7 zone, you go to the zoning and you see above the base density, ultimately you can get up to respectively a 4.5 and a 5 FAR. So, and when we do our plans for those areas, we try to illustrate that. In fact, I can't recall with the Austin Heights neighborhood plan, there was a lot of illustration that showed.
So just clarification. So in that zoning, the wording is there, here's your base zoning. With density bonusing, you can get to this level and no higher than that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's important for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what we try to do is, again, we get it. Most people, FAR is what you're talking about. So in our planning processes, we try to illustrate that. We'll show, a bird's eye view or street sections will illustrate so people can see, okay, that's what they're talking about. That's the type of streetscape. Those are the type of buildings, the size of buildings that may be possible under these land use designations and the companion zoning. So we try not to have uncertainty and surprises.
Okay, good. Well, that actually answers a lot of it for me. Mr. Johansson's going to give me some more.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and just adding on to that, the uncertainty can further be, or there can be more certainty if there's height limits in the zone, where you have a certain density, but it's how that density is shaped within that height limit is also what matters. So that's why we've identified as part of option 2 and 3 that we may be looking at height limits in this area.
Right. Okay. So thank you for that. And I think that option 2 is the best option. Therefore, it moves things along more quickly than option 3 would. It does provide, through the public hearing that would be necessitated by an OCP amendment, the ability for the public to have their say on this. Beyond that, my goodness, there's been an awful lot said about this. We waited a long time. I think the number 2 is the reasonable way to go forward on this. Councillor Reid wanted to speak again.
I want to address affordable housing for Councillor Wilson. If you look at the yellow line, that's what we're talking about. There really isn't any housing in there. And so all we have to gain by going forward with the yellow block is more housing, because we're going to get high rises. The part that you're concerned about, and we've all been concerned about, are all private properties, which we virtually don't have a lot of control over. They can tear them down and build 10 stories where there's 3, and that might work. But the thing I have to say to you, all of those, that's affordable housing, but a lot of those buildings are strata. They're owned. They're not all just rental affordable housing. So there's going to be people in there in strata buildings that are going to be approached by developers, and they make their own deals, suite for suite or however they do it. So that will develop. But in order to get the affordable housing moving and going and multiplying, you have to get a core, and this is the core. The core doesn't take away any housing. It indeed adds housing. And the other thing I want to bring up is that recently we've seen in the papers, and I think, Terry, you and I have spoken about this a bit, but the government, I've always said for years to them, you guys can't afford, your government, you can't afford to go out and build houses because you can't build them as reasonable as everybody else. But you can go to different developers and buy in options low enough that your pre-sales, and you can buy affordable housing units, 10 or 20 or 12 or 3, in every apartment block around, whether they be subsidized or whether they're just held for low rent. So there is opportunities there, and I just think it's so important to get this core started. And
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Now, do we need a show of hands around the table for the different options right now then?
I'll move option.
Okay, so I'm going to move, and I'll just call for option 1.
I'd love to have option 1, but it's not
so
going to
there's
go.
one person, Councillor Reid, for option 1. Option 2?
So now I have to go to 2 because I couldn't get 1.
So Marsden, Reid, O'Neill, Towner and Asmundson option, well, that basically gives you the majority. Did you want your vote? It's not for recorded votes anyway, so there's the direction to, and now I'll entertain a motion to receive.
Second?
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor Towner. Any further discussion? All in favour? Opposed? That carries unanimously.
It's a good discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good discussion, good feedback.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving on to item 5. Item 5 is the Coquitlam Celebrates Canada Day 2016 Canada at 150. Recommendation to receive the report.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's moved by Councillor Towner, seconded by Councillor Marsden.
Well, where are we?
We're on number 5, and the report purpose is to provide us information. I'm hoping you want some feedback on 2016 as well, and on your plans for 2017. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Don't want this to be a one-way thing?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
if
good.
you, we're certainly open to any commentary council might have. It was a great event. It was a new site location. We felt it worked very, very well. We just wanted to highlight the results of that, of the day. Also, just looking forward to 2017. We are trying to enhance the event with some additional components, enhanced components. We've highlighted that, and as you see on the 5-year plan for the event, as it's transitioned now to what we believe is the ultimate location. There's work being done on the Town Center Master Plan that will also look at this. We are going to be doing a bit of a review on the budget just to make sure that we're still on track. We just thought we'd highlight that for council and for any information you might want to provide staff. And Karen is here to answer any questions.
Nancy, welcome. Councillor Reid has
The one
a comment.
comment I've heard is about the liquor place.
Yep.
I think we need to somehow enhance that better. And the other thing was that where they serve liquor, they actually had tables where you could grab a beer and a hot dog and sit down and talk. But there was no table place where people could just either have their own picnic or buy from the vendors and then sit down.
Good point. So therefore,
Because Terry and I had to keep running back to the beer one because we didn't find anywhere else to sit.
of course, to buy more beer. Any other comments or feedback, Brent? Councillor Asmundson.
Just on the Canada Heritage Grant, you got $25,000 in 2016. Is there a limit on the Heritage Grant, or can you apply for $50,000? Or is it?
You can apply for, through the chair, you can apply for $50,000.
I hope we do.
Yes. We are intending to enhance our request, ask for more.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll get more, and as highlighted, if we do get more, then it will offset anything that council might want to consider in terms of the additional cost that we might incur if council supports our enhancements to the Canada
Or we could say
150.
that
So,
if we get $50,000, we'll do this. If we don't, we'll scale it back.
although we will bring forward a request at the budget session, so you'll see that coming forward. In any event, we just can't assume we'll get that grant.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to save money by having somebody sing the national anthem for free?
You don't want to lose people coming.
Zerillo.
Well, I had a request that might be absolutely not possible, but would it be something we could ask for free use of the Evergreen Line extension on Canada Day for 2017? It might be nice for people that are in Coquitlam to be able to, the Evergreen Line extension, to be able to get onto the SkyTrain
For free?
for free on Canada Day.
Great idea.
It would be an opportunity, even if it's the Evergreen Line extension, it would be right from Lougheed, so some of our Sylvan residents.
Somebody else's budget. So.
Yeah, someone else's budget. Yeah, good idea. But anyway,
We will look at it.
because I saw parking was an issue, so.
We can only ask.
Oh, yeah, and it's 150th
It's our 150th birthday.
So why
So-
doesn't the province do it free?
The federal government could do it.
Yeah, free.
Well, we've got lots of discussions with the province on the line at the moment, so.
Excellent. Councillor Marsden, can you
Great,
top
thank
that
you.
one?
Top that one. Yeah, spending other people's money is always easy. I think TransLink will look at it and say, hold it a second, we just got the word that it's ours as of December 2nd, so it's now their budget, not the province's. That's right. So, but if you can figure out a way to make that happen, I think that's a great idea. It is on the topic of it being the 150th. I think doing something special is great. I think looking at the amphitheater and bringing a Canadian act is a wonderful thing. We can anticipate, though, that they're going to be in great demand.
Yeah.
Their price point has gone up, and their availability has gone down because a lot of communities are going to be looking to do this. So I would encourage us to get on this as soon as possible, make a commitment that, yes, get a number in mind. I know there's a number of people that are residents of our community that are involved in this industry that might be able to help with the connections and get a good, solid name act to headline and go from there. And
We will.
Okay, I think
that is the goal. As you'll see highlighted in our budget request, we need to move on that quickly if we're going to be hiring.
As far as how it went last year, again, I thought it did step it up. I mean, it was a new venue in terms of the new layout, and so there's always going to be some growth pains with that. I think if anything, we were victims of success in terms of it seemed crowded in some choke points because there was just so many people there. So, as Yogi Berra said, no one goes there anymore. It's too crowded. I think that's what we certainly saw at Canada Day this year, and I hopefully we can address some of that.
Thank you. Councillor Towner.
Thank you. That's hilarious. I was going to say that exact same quote, Yogi Berra's, victims of our own success. I just wanted to say, I didn't know that it was voted the #1 A-list outdoor concert and best annual Tri-Cities Festival.
That's true.
And I wanted to say that's outstanding because I know that hair salons and gyms and different businesses email their clients asking them to vote, and I'm pretty sure that we didn't solicit these votes. So to win without any kind of solicitation really shows you how successful it was by people in the Tri-Cities. So it was a fantastic day, and I just I'm curious, how many volunteers did we use for Canada Day? Do you know?
Through the chair, I don't have the exact number. We had a fair number compared to, for example, Kaleidoscope, because we have a core group that return every year, so fairly significant. But I can certainly provide that information another time.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'm just curious. I mean, it was such a great event, and I know staff worked really hard and everybody, but we couldn't have done something like that without the volunteers. So. And everything that Dennis just said about the big party and the act and the entertainment and stuff. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 is the Festivals and Events Policy Update. The report is before you for information.
Yes, for information and for feedback, I understand as well. Moved by Councillor Zerillo. Any seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Marston. Councillor Reid would like to speak.
I've got on page 6, or item 6, page 1, at the bottom, you say, although an accurate accounting of the economic impact of Coquitlam is not currently available, it is likely that the financial benefits are significant. Wouldn't this be, wouldn't it be great if our Economic Development Committee could take this on as something to do? And I would think that it would be really interesting to hear from the nail salons and the restaurants and that, what they think it does, and get information from them. So I don't know if Deb would take it on, but if they would, I think it would be kind of a neat process. And the second thing is, on your assessments of all the identified event sites and all the things that you want to come in, I don't want this so restricted down to the blue awnings with yellow ribbons that people can only have an event that fits in this little box, and we miss out on a whole bunch of good stuff. And that concerns me. So whoever's on the phone at events in your department, I want to have someone with giant, great big ideas who won't turn anything down without having a second or third, or at least bringing it to us and saying, what do you think? Okay. That really concerns me because this is getting very bureaucratic and I don't like it. Thank you.
Councillor Marston.
Thank you. So 2 points that Councillor Reid hit on that I'd made notes about. And with regards to the economic development, there are, in many cases, generally accepted factors that are used from an economic development factors. So I would think from a festival perspective, there might be something out there already. So I would encourage us to try and identify that. you think back to some of the big events, they'll talk about how many millions it had in economic spin-off. So I think from a community perspective, there's got to be some community event factors in terms of what's going on, in terms of visitation, et cetera. So I'd encourage us to try and look and see what might be available there. And that might be done in concert with our economic development manager or department. And then with regards to the last comment about the rules, I think it's important to recognize that, this is the rules, they're policies, it's bureaucratic, and events are creative, and seldom do creativity and bureaucracy meet. So you've got a challenge here.
Well, they live within our department.
They do, which might make some really interesting meetings. I'd like to be the fly on the wall. I think having that desire to get to yes. How do we get to yes? How do we open it up? And in a community as diverse as ours, it can be very, very difficult when the rules are very constrained to make sure that we fit all the various cultures that might want to move forward and host events here. So I get have policies, have frameworks, but let's try and ensure that we've got that overriding sense of perspective and common sense to try and serve the full community, and regardless of their cultural background. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
And to the department's defense, I think they've come up with very creative ways to ask for enhanced services in many different areas of their jurisdiction. Councillor Marsden, you missed that one. For your, I'll repeat it later. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Item 7 is the asset management implementation for engineering and public work assets. We have introductory comments by the Acting General Manager, Engineering and Public Works, and a presentation by the asset management engineer. The report is for your information.
Thank you.
I'll actually behave for this one.
Mr. Sin.
Yes. I've lost my place. Sorry.
Okay, next.
Great.
You have your chance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. Just going to make some opening remarks, and I'm going to turn over the presentation to Jude, our asset management engineer. The asset management program is an important project for the Engineering and Public Works Department, mainly because it sets the processes and the tools and how we manage about $2.5 billion worth of assets. Those are water, sewer, drainage, and road assets. We started this process, the asset management program, in early 2015, and that started with a review of our business practices for how we manage our assets. This report tonight is really an update to highlight some of the activities in the asset management program. Before I hand over the presentation to Jude, I just want to point out that our current funding levels for how we operate, maintain, and replace our utilities and transportation systems are generally considered adequate. This report is not recommending any changes to those basic funding envelopes. At this time, we're recommending that we improve the systems and the tools that we use to manage our funding. So I'll let Jude Halaya Nagam to give his presentation.
Thank you, Danish. Chair and councillors. On June 1st of last year, we have presented a study report to the council on the gaps in our systems related to management of engineering and public works assets and the strategic direction we need to take. At that time, we said we are going to study the recommendations of the report and come back in a year time and let you know how we want to bridge those gaps and implement the recommendations given in that report to manage our $2.5 billion worth of infrastructure assets in a sustainable and cost-efficient way. Just to refresh your memories, we have about $790 million worth of transportation assets $760 million worth of drainage assets, and water and sewer assets each worth about $740 million. As you know, the purpose of managing these assets is to create value to our residents through providing optimum level of service at the lowest possible cost. While we are doing successfully that now, can we continue this into the long-term future, considering our assets will age and the demand for services will increase with the increasing population as the city grows. This graph is showing how our population was increasing over years. And you could appreciate the trend that shows will increase the demand for services. While the demand for services increases, we also know the assets that provide those services will continue to deteriorate. This graph shows how much of water main replacement that will have to be handled over the next 100 years. While the existing level of investment of $1.3 million is adequate for the existing demand for replacement, we can appreciate in future we may have challenges when we come to the points when we need to replace the rest of the stuff. That applicable to sanitary, that is applicable to drainage as well. But we can meet those challenges provided we plan ahead and be prepared. Our review is showing that the general level of funding or funding envelopes for these assets are adequate. But what we need are the right tools and systems to manage the money that has been given to us in a most cost-effective and efficient way. To do that, we need to make sure our systems are tight. That means we need to re-engineer our systems and processes. We need to make sure the existing resources are utilized to its optimum level, and the decisions that we make are sound, and that means we need to create an environment so that the managers will be provided with informed decision-making capacity so that the decisions can be better, therefore it can save money. Let's quickly see how an empowered decision-making will help us. Number one, whether for planning or budgeting or planning, scheduling our activities, we may have a lot of data. But are they translated into valuable information? We know information stacking is not intelligence. Are information providing intelligence enough to our managers to make better decisions? So we need to create information that will help managers make better planning and budgeting decisions. Number two, the timing of decisions related to asset management plays a big role. For example, not rehabilitating an asset at the right time at a particular condition may increase our costs threefold to fivefold later in the asset's life cycle. That means we need to provide our managers information on the condition of assets, their related level of service, at what trigger points the translations happen, so that the managers can make the right decisions at the right time, and these informations must be in the right format at the right time. Number 3, despite of all this, flexibility in decision making is paramount. So we need to provide tools and information platforms to our managers so that they can make flexible decisions. Do I have the flexibility to make this project or delay this project over that? Understanding the costs, impacts, and also the understanding the levels of service impacts. When we ensure that these 3 are addressed, the platforms and the information that managers receive will help them to make better decisions, therefore saving more money, thus creating value to our residents. Let's try to further understand this one. Let me refresh your mind to the recommendations of the gap study that we presented to you a year ago. Well, what they have told us is we need to improve asset data collection. We may not have enough data collecting to make the right decisions, and also improve on reporting. We need to use optimally the existing resources. This is very important, to use optimally the existing resources before thinking about additional resources. We need to have a better decision support system so that the managers and whoever is making those decisions can make valuable decisions. Number 4, we need to understand the relationship between levels of service and the cost of service so that we can appreciate at what cost this level of service is provided. And also we need to understand what is our long-term financial outlay to manage these assets. Not 5 years, at least up to 20 years or even further. So during the past year, we dived deep into these recommendations and tried to understand what this really means in terms of our business operations. What are the things that we need to change? And what we found resulted in a program called Asset Management Program. That is what we recommended to get implemented. There are 4 major areas we want to concentrate on. Leveraging technology to get advantage. We need to use the data. We need to re-engineer the processes what we have to gain better efficiency. We need to make sure the cost efficiencies are achieved. We need to make sure the assets are managed at the best cost-effective point. When we do all this, we have to be aware that everything must be done in complete goal alignment with the goals set by the city and the council. We cannot be tangential to what the goals specified by the council. Beyond this, the most important thing is to have the customer focus, not the asset focus. What it means is the complete understanding we are managing these assets not because we have them. We are managing these assets because we use them to provide services to our residents. As long as we have that customer service focus above the asset focus, we will be able to deliver better services to our customers at the best possible way. So that translates into our next steps over the next 2 years. We would embark in these exercises. One, the first is to establish the levels of service and cost of services and the relationship between them. Number 2, we will develop and implement a condition assessment program so that we can assess the condition of our assets and use to advantage to better utilize to its optimum level. Number 3, we will model the risks of our major assets so that we can understand the risks, underlying risks, when we make decisions to delay a replacement or advance. Number 4, we will develop a platform where we will be able to decide on the replacement of assets, the best point of replacement of that asset, not early, not late. Number 5, we will develop a sustainable financial modeling so the council and the city and everybody can understand what is our commitment through these assets on a long-term future. The 6th one, improve data management systems so that we can have platforms of informed decision making, and this is one of the most and important thing because decisions cost money or it can save the other way. Further to this one, we will report back to the council periodically on how we are implementing the asset management program, how our assets are performing compared to what we were expecting, because we now probably have a little bit more understanding with the condition data, condition of our assets. Are we in the right track? Time to time, we will report back as to what are requirements for asset replacements and also key performance indication related to implementation of the asset management as well as the assets. With that, I'm ready to answer the questions you may have.
Yes, thank you. We have several councillors with comments or questions. Cirillo, Marsden, Reid, and Asmundson. Councillor Cirillo to begin with.
Well, thank you for that. Actually, the Nessies, when I saw the Nessie, the big one, that's actually what keeps me up at night. As a city councillor, that's what keeps me up at night. Every time we get a new park, every time we authorize a new this or new that, I see that Nessie every single time, and it's upsetting. So I appreciate you bringing it today. I want to say thank you for the information. We're talking about it being within the current envelope, so I'm kind of wondering, this may be setting the stage for something that's coming, because you're not asking for money at this point. You're saying that basically you've gone through the exercise already of deciding that we need the AMP, so now we're moving through these steps. So I'm kind of wondering what you kind of setting the stage for, because this is really operational. What you brought today is really operational. We probably don't even need to know what's happening internally. You're not asking us for any additional money to buy software. You're not asking us for any additional money for subscription. You seem to have it well covered. I'm thinking, I circled established sustainable financial modeling. I'm sure that's where you're going to come into a hiccup. So what are you looking for today?
Yes, through the chair, this is only an information report just to let us know kind of where we're at in the implementation of our asset management program. And if you kind of look closely at the Nessie curves, they were presented in 2015 and very briefly in the slide presentation. Really, based on the age of our assets, we don't anticipate any kind of real significant increase in expenditures, for the next decade. So really we want to be sure that we have our processes in place where we can assess the condition of these assets, assess their risk, and then, as we see these assets coming to the end of service life and starting to fail, we'll be able to kind of project or determine, how much we need to be spending, how much we need to be replacing kind of as we move forward from that point on. So really this is just to kind of inform council that we're building the systems and tools for us to make those decisions in the future.
And is it just engineering assets, or are we talking about all the city assets, including parks?
Right now, we're through the chair. Right now, we're only looking at engineering assets, water, sewer, drainage, and road assets. Parks, through facilities, have a similar program for their buildings. The parks infrastructure, like parks and other infrastructure and assets. I guess they're looking to see what we're doing, and they may piggyback on our program at a later time. I don't know if you want to add to that, Raul.
Okay, because that's my note. Let's get this for parks, because if we can, every time we build one, if we can show the future, that's an incredible insight. You said the insights are piling up the data is getting us nowhere. It's the insights that matters, right? So.
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, just to support Mr. Sung, we just brought forward a report, if you recall, on the park infrastructure. It was just really an update. It highlighted, if I recall, $150 million worth of park infrastructure that we believe is currently in our asset and the park's assets. We have tried to match step for step what engineering is doing so that we can take advantage of some of that work, and so we're working closely with the engineering department on this. So we simply highlighted kind of the asset, the magnitude of assets that we believe we are dealing with, and our next steps, which we highlighted in that report, was really finalizing that and putting together a methodology as to how we will provide for the long-term sustainability of park assets and infrastructure. And we will be working with engineering public works on that to make sure that we're consistent.
Because, I mean, that comes into my mind every time we approve a park. That comes into my mind, right? How much is this going to cost going forward? Thank you so much. It really gives me great sense of security that you're all over this, so thank you for that.
Okay, through Chair to Councillor Zarello, I can assure you there is no plans behind in bringing this information. It is informational, and it is also important for us to see when the gap report said there are potential or opportunities for improving on the efficiencies of the existing systems. It is important we do that, and that is why we are trying to do that. We believe the way to save money is not to spend, but we will first find all existing avenues to get more out of the existing system, and then we will see whether there is justification for more or more spending.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have Councillor Marsden, then Reid, then Asmussen.
5 questions have been answered. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reid.
Mine are all funny questions. They're all very basic questions, and I'm looking where you say business improvements in these areas will improve effectiveness and efficiency in operations. So, Mr. Soon, will this system somehow improve lights going on and off automatically from a button, traffic signals being managed by buttons, and something to stop people cutting into a brand new road when we've done it because they need to slice it up for something? Is there anything, will this improve the actual day-to-day things that people on the ground complain about?
No. Through the chair, whether kind of pressing buttons changes things, that's kind of the technology of the assets we have. Obviously, those will be reviewed. And so will they be enhanced to allow for more, more efficiency? Yeah, I would say absolutely. As technology and innovation changes, they will be incorporated into our systems. I guess the other one that's important is in terms of, will we cut into newly paved pavement. Yeah, that's one thing the asset management program, if we get a little more sophisticated, hopefully we'll do better, that we'll be able to coordinate kind of the construction and of all our assets, and when all these assets get kind of rehabilitated, so that we don't rehabilitate roads and then we decide a few years later we're going to rehabilitate our water main.
Exactly.
So absolutely those things will be coordinated.
What about the lights? I guess Parks does that, I don't know, but it's sort of something that seems to me we should have better control over. You have people, not everyone, but lots of people phone and say, I was by 11:30 last night and those damn lights were on till 4 a.m., Well, I've asked before and people say, well, it costs too much to have someone run around turning lights off and on, so the question is, if we're going into all these efficiencies and effectiveness, is this the kind of thing we're going to be able to look for improvement.
Absolutely. Some of the infrastructure is what it is, and when it has to be replaced, we look to the most modern technology, and we work with engineering. Some of our infrastructure has a good crossover with engineering. Field lighting at times, there's community coaches that might leave them on, and we have a lot of them on timers. There's times when we have an allocation, but a team on a field, but a sports team decides to cancel it, and they don't tell us. So there's some of these things happen, and we're working closely with our partners.
So, stupid question: do we have the ability to turn lights on fields off and on from a central spot?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm done. That was it.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Asmundson.
A very good report. When you look at the $2.5 billion worth of assets and long-term requirements of that, you really look at the magnitude of it. And when I read the report, that sort of stuck out to me, the need for it. And I think I'm quite pleased anytime I see a report talking about creating greater efficiencies and cost savings that don't cost us anything in the budget is an excellent news story for us at Council here. And I guess my issue is that I think we've looked at relining of pipes, how we do that, understanding which pipes do need to replace and which ones don't need to replace. And sometimes we've been a little hit and miss there. Will this also, have we backed up, like we've had some data area in the Maillardville area where we don't know exactly some of the assets, or we've had some surprises where pipes and things were there. Is this going to help us explore and find out some of that missing data that we had from the early years, or is it?
It's through the chair. Absolutely. As part of the asset management program is try to develop a complete inventory of all our assets, because if we don't have that inventory, we can't really manage it properly. And then the kind of the secondary, I won't say secondary, the next component to the asset management plan is to assess all those, the condition of those assets. So hopefully, we can, rehabilitate or replace assets before they fail. But obviously, it's almost impossible to catch everything before it fails. But this will improve our ability to manage our assets.
This will give us a better asset recording of all our assets moving forward. So we don't have, like, Maillardville, when we built the arena, we had a surprise about a pipe that we didn't expect that was there. And down Maillardville had some properties where they went to develop, and there was a pipe that we now needed right away on their property, different things like that.
Yes.
So this will get us better information, better understanding where everything's at.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's the last speaker. I'd entertain a mover and a seconder here.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Asmundson to receive this report. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving on to other business. The first other business item concerns injectable drug use in the community and was raised by Councillor Zerlo.
Councillor Zerlo.
Okay, so this may have been covered the other week, but there was an article in the Tri-City News on October 7th entitled Collecting Used Needles, the Goal for Fraser Health. And the representative from Fraser Health had said it's too early to say which new communities could get additional harm reduction services or what they might be, and followed up to say we want to ensure we create access across the whole region and there are no areas being unintentionally missed in terms of adequate harm reduction access. And the current Fraser Health partner is Rain City. So my question was, because they said they were in conversation with municipalities, is Coquitlam on that list, as we do already have an area where Rain City operates in our city, to be partners with Fraser Health on this initiative?
Deputy City Manager Dumont has a comment.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, we are on the list. When Rain City came as a delegation, just prior to that delegation, we did receive a copy of a letter from Fraser Health that outlined that they were going to be working in partnership with Rain City on a couple of things related to needles. One is education component, and the second was a needle recovery program, so working with former addicts that would help with the needle cleanup as well as education to existing addicts. So that particular program hasn't been rolled out yet. They haven't developed any details yet, but that information was provided to us a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, I think I did see the letter. Was it, it's a public letter?
Yes, it is a public letter.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just had something. There was a story, I believe, in this morning's Vancouver Sun about some communities in the Fraser Health area that were asking for supervised injection sites. Has Fraser Health talked about anything like that happening in Tri-Cities area?
Not that I'm aware of. I've not heard anything along those lines.
Our city was not named there, and the mayor of Surrey was quoted as saying that she wouldn't mind it as long as it was in an existing facility such as a homeless shelter. And I understand that would raise a little concern at my end, but okay, I'm glad that we're not going there. Anything else, Councillor Zerlo?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next item.
OB2 concerns RCMP Auxiliaries and was raised by Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you very much. So almost exactly 2 years ago, there was a terrorist attack in Ottawa, and that led to an edict from RCMP headquarters in Ottawa that really stripped our auxiliary constables of a lot of their independence and powers, and we were quite concerned about that as a council, and passed a motion to send a letter asking for the edict to be overturned. In the months since then, we've heard dribs and drabs that parts of that edict are being overturned again and allowing auxiliary constables to have more and more power. And quite recently, actually within the last month, I read a news story that the RCMP could rescind the demotion of auxiliaries, it says, so this news story, which is in the October 18th Times Colonist, indicated that action from 2 years ago might be completely overturned, and our auxiliaries moved right back up to having the same independence and powers that they had before. And I want to know if we've received any official notification of this yet, and if so, what's the impact, and basically what's the impact. I think it'd be good news if this happens.
Thank you very much, through the chair. You accurately reflected what happened with the unfortunate death of the unarmed sentry in Ottawa. The RCMP basically passed an edict that auxiliary constables couldn't work if they weren't in the presence of an armed constable, which basically took away the effectiveness of the program. And there's been a few iterations of that since then. It now looks like they're reconsidering that, and what they will hopefully do, one of the options they're considering is putting the choice back in municipalities' hands in terms of what range of services the auxiliary constables can do. So basically from a minimal service to all the duties that they did prior to that incident 2 years ago. And there was a questionnaire that was on the UBCM website saying pick an option. It was sent to me as a principal police contact for Coquitlam, and I responded to that. It was just basically tick a box for the option 3, because that reflected council's direction through that notice of motion. And option 3 would give council the choice of deciding what the role of auxiliary constables would be in the community. We could, under that scenario, restore their duties to what they were prior to that incident 2 years ago.
So the process will be, all of those responses will be collated or something, I guess, and then a decision will be made. Yes, we will give councils the option to do all of this, or maybe there's some other decision. But we'll hear back eventually on exactly what we can do.
That is correct. It'll be in the hands of the feedback will be in the hands of the RCMP, and I'm hopeful that they will come back giving municipalities a range of options in terms of what they see the role of auxiliaries will be in their community.
Did they have any timeline for decision making on this?
There was no timeline provided.
Knowing how efficient the RCMP are, I'm sure it will be very soon. Thank you. Councillor Asmundson.
Thank you very much. Good conversation. I always concerned about when coming back for some municipal, is there some caveats to that by the municipalities wanting auxiliaries? Is there going to be a costing formula or cost transferred? to the municipalities to deal with the auxiliaries. And I've heard through different sources in the RCMP that they do come to auxiliaries. They're looking at a different uniform for auxiliaries to wear. Do you have any information on that?
Well, there's a number of different potential options. Some of those options would see auxiliary constables wearing a different uniform. The cost driver will be depending on the range of services that you decide for your auxiliary constables. The more service they provide, the more training that will be required for the constables. So that would be the linkage to costs. But I would also say that under a scenario where we would be just reinstating our auxiliary constables doing similar duties as they did previously 2 years ago, the cost should be similar to what they were then and the levels of training. So, but they're basically basing the amount of training on linking it to what duties those auxiliary constables would do.
I guess, Mike, I've been around long enough that we've seen surprises from the RCMP involving our costs for the RCMP from time to time, and I think sometimes there may be more that might be there, so I want to be keeping our eye on that part.
Yes, and that's an astute comment, and the devil's always in the details, so we'll have to wait and see.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have any comments or questions? No? Oh, yes, Councillor Towner.
Has there been any resignations from the auxiliary program because of this?
I know that I generally, and not just in Coquitlam, there was disappointment with the move that happened with the auxiliary constables because a lot of those people are potentially interested in a career in law enforcement, and taking away their ability to do ride-alongs and do some of the stuff that they did, I think was quite disappointing to them because it was at no fault of their own that the rules changed. I don't believe there was a bunch of resignations at the Coquitlam detachment. I heard there might have been one individual that decided not to continue participating because of the changes. But I know that having a more robust program would be more positive in terms of the auxiliaries.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk.
The last other business item, OB3, pertains to density bonus and development cost charges for 509 Clarke Road and was raised by Councillor Neal.
Yeah, thank you. So over the weekend, we received an email, I guess late Friday, from a person who was interested in developing in the city and had developed, according to the email, a pro forma that based on certain density bonus payments at a certain level, and over the several months or some time that it's taken the issue to progress, those density bonus payments have risen, and to the point where this person is saying that it affects the viability of the project. I guess I try to follow all the nuances of what the planning department does, but I was surprised. I didn't know there was this escalation clause on our density bonuses. It's there, I guess. I didn't know about it. And so I wanted to raise the issue just to get clarification what does exist and whether or not this can be a problem with, because we're very big on saying with our CACs and everything, everything's up front. You know, it's not like a really big city a little to the west of us that doesn't let people know what's happening and tries to persuade them to voluntarily contribute more money than they want to. And we're up front about everything, but this one here seemed to be like, oh, well, we said this back then, and now we're saying this now, and to me, it was a bit of a shocker. And maybe I should have known more, but maybe you can just educate us a bit on this and also talk about the impact this has on the viability of projects that are in stream.
Can we get a report?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Some fair questions there. But first, just let me reassure Council, we have received Mr. Gilmore's email. He's with the Augusta Development. That's the project on Clarke at North Road, you know, that prominent corner site there. Mr. Fuji's got back with a preliminary response and just let him know we're looking into it, and we'll reply with a fuller response. Plus, we'll keep Council apprised. But also, I think fundamentally, too, we will want to report back to Council because it does point to some a need to just make sure we're doing the right thing through our density bonusing system. And so just more direct reply on your question. Our system is set up such that density bonusing is there at the option of the developer, as we were discussing earlier. Most of our zones, our higher density zones, there's a base density up to 2.5, and that bottom portion, that base density, is dealt with through the community amenity contribution. So it's an amount per square foot buildable in that area. Above that, it steps up in 0.5 FAR increments, and each of those increments has a certain percentage that goes to the city, a certain percentage that's retained by the developer. And it's all set out in the zoning bylaw. Remember, I was mentioning earlier, it's all clear, we're above board. And I think that's one of the merits of our system. What may be a little less clear is how and when that density bonus value is determined and communicated. The original intent was to do that in the lead up to the development permit stage. And this is where planning staff worked very closely with Perry staff in lands and properties to inform the applicant through the process of the system, first of all, but what sort of valuation we're looking at. And the thought is to identify that number as the applicant is completing their development permit application. And council will remember with these major projects, it goes through first reading, public hearing. Often there's concepts and plans that you'll see a pretty exciting one tonight. But it's once they get clear of the public hearing, that's when they have a sense of this project is likely to go if they get second and third reading that night. And again, that's one of the things I think one of the good things we do in our system is we are prepared to consider second and third reading on the night of the public hearing. That's a pretty strong indication. They then get on to the development permit drawings, which takes a lot of money and time. Through that process, everyone has a better fix on what this project is ultimately going to be. How much floor area, residential, commercial, townhouses, what have you. And through that is a better, more accurate representation of what the final floor area would be, which translates back into the density and density bonusing. So the desire is to have that number identified when they go for their final DP submission. That's what goes forward to council. And often our reports, you'll see under financial implications, it talks about CACs and DCCs and also density bonusing number. Sometimes in our reports, I think we've actually identified the price per square foot that has been agreed to as with assistance from Perry's area. That is the amount that's set, and it's then payable at the time of building permit issuance. And the reason for that is, first, that just reflects what we do for development cost charges. They're identified earlier on, and that's not payable until the BP is issued. CACs, building permit application fees, which could be fairly generous as well. And so the thought was to defer all those heavy hits, those heavy costs, to the end of the process when they're very close to getting their building permit, which has value. They can then turn around and go out and complete their marketing and sales. So it's money in, money out, if you will. I think what's happened in this instance was and the project took a little while to come together, too. And we're looking into that, so we will be reviewing the timeline. Earlier in the year, we're all caught up in a period of rapid real estate price escalation, and the sense was between planning staff and advice from strategic initiative staff who have a better understanding of land values that we needed to have a more current system to make sure we are tracking those amounts over time. So that's really where the 6-month time frame came in. It's just to make sure that we weren't dealing with yesterday's numbers if the project was going ahead and being approved tomorrow or today. So, and that may be a little aggressive in terms of a timeline, but it reflected the thinking of the time where prices are just going like this. What we want to do is, and I've had quite a bit of discussion today with both George and with Perry, and we'll put our heads together and review what's happened here and come back and have further discussion with council. Because I know also that the mayor's not here today, nor is Councillor Hodge, and they would both like to take part of that discussion. So if you wouldn't mind, just give us a chance. We'll go back. We'll get some more information in hand. and then we can have that fuller discussion.
Very happy with that answer. Thank you very much. Did anybody else want to talk? Councillor Asmussen?
Well, the mayor did send quite a detailed response, and I think he points out some differing positions from the applicant on why we have a floating rate and the benefits to a floating rate. And in his email, he talks about that. I don't think there are any developers out there that weren't aware of this.
When?
And then the other point about this is that I've met with the gentleman, I talked to it, and I broached this with the staff early on, but I think we need the full information from both sides on this one. And even right now, I think if staff have pointed out to me, and I had a conversation recently, that the building permit application is ready to be picked up. And it's been up for at least 3 weeks to a month, something like that, but staff will report back. But the applicant won't pick it up until the new year because they don't want to pay the fees until the new year.
All right, well, so we shouldn't get into that detail here.
But those are some of the issues going both sides on. I think you got to be fair on both equations to this. So I look forward to staff coming back with taking the mayor's information he's provided to us in an email and staff reviewing this issue and if we can make better changes and be more upfront about it. And if more developers didn't know about it, we need to know about that. But I think we need more information at this time from staff on both sides to this issue.
Quite happy to get that. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
I think we're all done then. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Marston, Towner, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. How long do you need?